All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is Wednesday, and that means it's time for another edition of the Morning Call with Tom Dabertin right here on WJOB 1230 AM, 104.7 FM, YouTube Live, and, of course, the TuneIn app. So we're going to be here until 9 o'clock. Looks like we have all 3 hours today, we kind of hope. And we're going to take your calls, and at 7 o'clock, Mont Hanley is going to come in, and we're going to talk about some of the incidents that occurred in the 1980s that have largely been glossed over by history that are very disturbing. These are incidents that put us on the brink of nuclear war. In fact, closer than we probably were during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we're going to talk about those at 7 o'clock. And we're going to talk about anything else that you want to talk about today. I certainly want to talk about the latest inactions by Congress about health care. So we'll talk about that and anything else that you'd like to talk about at 219-845-1100. But before we do anything else, let's go to traffic and weather. And traffic, Northwest Indiana looks good, 80-94. The toll road, Klein Avenue, I-65, all are in good shape. There's a little bit of a slowdown at the toll plaza out in Portage going eastbound. It shows that it's a little bit slower than normal, so be careful over there. In Illinois, things look generally pretty good. The Ryan, Skyway, 294, 394. However, there's some police activity on I-57 northbound from 294 over to the Ryan. So you may want to stay out of that area this morning. Otherwise, again, looking pretty good. Some traffic, I should mention, a little traffic on the Bishop Ford, but nothing too bad. Overall, looks pretty good going into the city this morning. And with that, it's time to talk to Lynette. And Lynette, I noticed you don't have a Buc-ee's shirt on today, but Buc-ee's, it was mentioned in the Times, for example, that Buc-ee's was looking at a location somewhere in central Indiana. They put out their list over the weekend, and no locations in Indiana between now and 2028. So with that, brighten up the day by giving us some good news on weather. How about that?
Good morning, everyone. Today we're at 38 degrees with highs of 35 and lows of 17. We'll be having periods of rain and then snowing this morning up to 1 inch. It's going to be cloudy and windy. Any heavier bursts of snow could reduce visibility and make roads slippery. And then later tonight, a couple of evening flurries. Otherwise, mostly cloudy and going to be colder. As for tomorrow on Thursday, we'll be having highs of 26 and lows of 22. It should be mostly cloudy and very cold. And then Friday, we'll be having highs of 31 and lows of 5. And it should be mostly cloudy with a couple of flurries. And watch for slippery spots early on.
That is like the wet blanket forecast. I mean, it's just like not enjoyable at all. But, I want to go back to my comment about Buc-ee's. So there was all this talk about that they were going to locate somewhere around Whitestown toward Indianapolis. So here is the official company statement to USA Today that was reported on over the weekend. They're going to locate in Ohio, Arizona, and Texas in 2026. In 2027, they're looking at Arkansas, Louisiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, 2 locations, Florida, and Texas. And in 2028, Georgia, Louisiana, North Carolina, another location in Florida, the other side of the state, Arkansas, and South Carolina. So they are not looking to come to Indiana anytime soon after all. So kind of a disappointment, I'm sure. You like Buc-ee's.
I do.
My wife likes Buc-ee's. My idea of Buc-ee's is She goes into Bucky's, and I have a 15-minute nap in the car. So
It's a
that's
fun place to shop around in.
it is. I mean, they have clean bathrooms. I'll say that.
They
But
do.
I mean, as soon as I pull into a Bucky's, I fuel up and then take a nap, which is okay by me. 845-1100 is the number to call, and I think we have some people holding, so let's go right to the callers. Good morning, you're on the air. Good morning. Hello. Good morning, you're on the air. Can hear somebody. Good morning, you're on the
Hello.
air.
Hello.
Yes, we're waiting for you. Yes, go ahead.
Hello.
All right, we'll have to drop the call. All right, 845-1100. We'll go to another caller. Good morning, you're on the air.
Yeah, I got some. I get a magazine called a British magazine called Science Focus, and a recent edition of it dealt with getting to sleep and using methods other than sleeping pills, kind of thing. And one of the things they recommended was before you turn in, have take some magnesium, which I get from Nature Made, and it's an chewable version, and also along with the magnesium, eat some walnuts, and
Really?
that seems to have helped in terms of getting to sleep sooner than in the past.
So walnuts and magnesium.
Yep.
I'm going to have to take a look at that. I will say that this time of the year, I bake nut roll, and I do sleep very well after eating way too much nut roll, and it has walnuts in it, so maybe there is connection. I did see, for example, I just got a pop-up on my phone about a new app, some sort of a sleep app that that came out, and I don't know if I'll download it or not, but it is some sort of a sleep app that basically helps you basically obviously sleep, and it regulates your rhythm, and so it must have some sort of sound application as well. But there's a lot of sleep aids out there, Walt. I don't know. I think it depends on the individual. One of the things that I've been told recently or read recently is that after you brush your teeth, you need to make sure that you thoroughly gargle, because otherwise the toothpaste has a tendency to kind of crust up inside the mouth, and that can be irritating and cause you to wake up. So.
Well, what I do when I brush my teeth at night is I take a mouthful of water to cleanse that toothpaste taste in my mouth. I take a big mouthful of water and spit it out. Maybe that's the rough equivalent of what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're saying you have to kind of gargle it through and make sure that you get, because otherwise it leaves like a film on the mouth that will cause you to wake up. I guess overnight it'll dry out the mouth and cause you to wake up. So I just saw that actually, I think it was Saturday, that's a real problem for people of falling asleep. At 7 o'clock, I mentioned I'm going to have Mon Hanley on. We're going to talk about some of those incidents with that happened in the 1980s that brought us on the brink of nuclear war, or nuclear annihilation, I should say, because the one incident, the one in Arkansas that I've talked about before, that one wouldn't have brought us on the brink of nuclear war with the Soviet Union. It just would have destroyed several states in the South. But I am reading currently a book by Tulsi Gabbard, and it is called For Love of Country. And I found it very interesting, 2024 New York Times bestseller. And I've got to read this to you because it's kind of it's entertaining to a point, and it's not. She says, one example of the lies and insanity, and she's talking about the idea that both parties think that nuclear war somehow is survivable, was a public service announcement made in New York City in 2022, narrated by an attractive female actor with a cheerful voice that begins with, "So there's been a nuclear attack. Don't ask me how or why, just know that the big one is hit. So what do we do?" And with a smile on her face, she says, "There are 3 important steps that I want you to remember. Those steps: Get inside and stay tuned. And she goes on to detail each of these steps, continuing with a big smile on her face in the event of a nuclear attack, as if it had been something like a bad winter storm. And at the end of the 30-second public announcement, she says, "Everything's going to be fine. You can count on it. We've got this." And she said that is just an example of the ridiculousness of both parties. She takes the Democrats and the Republicans to task in her book over the idea that somehow we've gotten to the point that nuclear war could ever be survivable. And her point is of course, as a former military officer, she understands exactly what would happen, and that if there was a nuclear attack on New York City, for example, there'd be millions of people that would be killed instantly, millions of others dying from radiation poisoning, and there'd be no salvation for them. There'd be no way of going in and handling the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of injuries, and that they'd just be left to die. And her point is, this is how ridiculous we've gotten as a society, that we actually have this idea in our minds that somehow people are going to survive a nuclear holocaust.
Well, if there was a general nuclear exchange between the United States and the old Soviet Union, I would say if you survived it, you would not want to live. You probably wouldn't want to live. Now, I suspect that if you had something like that, that people in the southern hemisphere would be more likely to survive than those of us in the northern hemisphere. But I think I heard you first talk about this incident in Arkansas with a 9 megaton missile. And to give you some idea as to how the Soviets think, they actually tested a 100 megaton nuke.
Right.
In Siberia. I mean, their missiles were not nearly as accurate as ours, and so they emphasized megatonnage to solve their aiming problem kind of thing. But to me, the big risks is not with the major players. I mean, the United States and Russia are the big leagues in terms of nuclear striking capability. It is the lesser elements, especially like the Indians and Pakistanis, the Israeli. They've got nukes. In fact, they've made very clear that if they ever lose a conventional war, that they would launch their missiles against Arab capitals. And then you have the North Koreans. It's the smaller, it's the B League crowd. They're the people that scare the bejeebers out of me, because when you don't have many nukes, there's a tendency to if you get into a fight that you look like you're going to lose, there's a much greater incentive to have a hair trigger to launch your nukes against the other side, and mainly to attack the big cities type thing. And whereas when you have the striking capability of the United States and Russia, the targeting tends to move toward striking each other's nuclear striking capability. Whereas even in their early days, when the Russians and the Americans had relatively smaller inventories of nukes, they targeted each other's big cities. But as the power built up on both sides, they targeted their striking capability, and that's something actually the large enough, the left, like they get it all wrong. I mean, they never get anything right, but this is another example of it. The whole point of building up the striking capability is to create deterrence. If you get to the point where no matter what you do, if you strike first, you're going to pay a very dear price for being irresponsible. But when you have the B League crowd, they're innately reckless as to how they manage their nuclear striking capability.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, in fact, the other book that I mentioned, I just finished reading the book by Annie Jacobson. She, her whole scenario begins with a strike by North Korea, and how things spin out of control very quickly, and before you know it, the Russians and the U.S. are launching at each other because of just misinformation and misidentification. But Gabbard's book is interesting. She really takes on both parties and kind of the Washington elite, although she does point out one thing that I found very interesting. She says in some detail that the idea that we would ever get Kim Jong-un or his family to give up nuclear weapons basically died with Muammar Gaddafi. And she said, you have to put squarely the blame on Hillary Rodham Clinton, that when Clinton was Secretary of State, she was the one who convinced Obama to go in and attack Libya and take out Gaddafi. And she said, that the whole agreement under the Reagan administration with Gaddafi is you give up your nuclear weapons and we leave you alone. And we did. And she's, Gabbard's book says that the problem is that Kim Jong-un looked at what happened to Gaddafi and said, never. You can't trust the Americans because the one person who gave up nuclear weapons was Gaddafi, and then what do? They end up killing him, and so the word of the United States just isn't valuable. And she also pointed out that this was quite a stumbling block with Syria for years. That Assad basically, he was tempted several times to give up power. Of course, he's now somewhere in Russia, but that he had considered it, but every time he looked at what we did with Libya and even with Iraq, and she just said that you have to understand sometimes that our word globally is not very good. It's not very trusted, and it's an interesting book. Again, she seems to have a great deal of disdain for both parties. I'll say that much.
Well, the we is Obama. Obama inflicted this on us. He gave us two big disasters. One, to discourage the minor players from giving up their nukes because Gaddafi was cooperating fully with the United States in more ways than one. I mean, he was taking terrorists from the United States to torture and then providing the intelligence to the Americans. And Obama decided to, for some reason, he decided to take Gaddafi out. And, of course, that sent a message to other minor players, you better not give up your nukes because you can't trust the Americans. Because, look, Gaddafi cooperated fully with Washington, and look what Obama did to him. And it's the second disaster is this Obamacare. It was all a fraud from the very beginning. And there were people in government who warned him that what you're talking about will precipitate a lot of corruption and misuse, and they ignored it all. And part of the deal with Obamacare was that the Supreme Court, the issue went to the Supreme Court, and never before had the Supreme Court ever allowed for government to impose what Obama was pushing in terms of Obamacare, but in the beginning it looked like the Supreme Court was going to go vote against it, but they came under tremendous pressure from the major heads of the prestigious law schools like Harvard, Yale, and places like that. They basically told the Supreme Court officials, this is a major piece of legislation for the first black president of the United States, and if you take this away from him, your name is mud.
Well,
so there was a racial dimension.
I will just say that the Affordable Care Act again there were some positive moves within the act. There were a lot of negative moves. There were a lot of things that even Obama at the time had mentioned didn't get accomplished. I mean, for example, Just reading the latest impasse in the Senate. The Democrats have a version, the Republicans have a version. The Democrats just want to continue the subsidies for another 3 years. The Republicans, led by Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, actually have some decent ideas. The problem is, I don't think it goes far enough. They're talking about doing the HSAs rather than the subsidies, which I think is a good move. They, however, ignored the idea of allowing business to go across state lines and create consortiums and associations to buy health insurance. And if you go back to the Affordable Care Act, if you go back to the original announcements, the idea was we were going to break down some of the roadblocks that exist to lower cost health care by allowing people to go across state lines through these consortiums. And the Republicans talked a good game. I'll tell you what, Walt, I think this is an Achilles heel that the Republicans own, and they're going to have to be very careful in next year's election because younger voters, all those voters, especially the ones attracted by people like Charlie Kirk, the one thing that they do repeatedly state in polling is that they will come out to vote if one side basically offers a decent proposal on health care versus the other. And I think that could be a very significant issue for next year. And again, it doesn't look right now like the Republicans are going to pull off anything much. Again, Cassidy's a smart guy. He's a physician. He used to run a federally subsidized healthcare facility. You see them all over the place, and many times you don't even know that they're federally subsidized. But those were some of the good things that came out of Obamacare to create these relatively inexpensive healthcare clinics. And Cassidy ran one. He understands the situation. He understands the system. You hear him on television, and he talks a good game, but his bill keeps on getting gutted, and which tells me that somebody else is pulling the strings. Hey, we've got to take a break. Thanks so much for the call.
Yep.
If you're holding, hang right in there. We'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break for some commercial messages. You're listening to the Morning Call on WJOB 1230 AM and 104.7 FM. We'll be right back. All right. Good morning again. It's Tom Dabertin in the morning call, and we've got a caller, so we'll go right to the caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yeah, it was me, the first caller.
I could tell. I could hear you.
It was my fault because I put my headset on, and that's why when I said something to you that I didn't hear no ringtone because, oh well, it was my mistake.
Anyway, go ahead.
JLB was working 100% perfect. Hey, on that 57, they had another shooting. Okay?
Yeah, they had another shooting, and the backup continues. But just for listeners, real fast, Mike, all of a sudden the Dan Ryan is now backed up beyond beyond the Skyway. So if you're headed into the city this morning, take Lakeshore Drive because the Dan Ryan is not going to get you there. Go ahead.
Yeah. In a second I'll talk about sleeping and snoring. You guys were all yakety-yakking about. But me and my sister had a little conversation yesterday because her and her boyfriend, fiance, she lived with almost all her life. They always go into Chicago. They take the train. They go into Chicago. They go to Christmas stuff, and they go to things, and they go into Chicago. So I was wondering why, because me and her went to that Polar Express the year before. And I drove because my sister doesn't like to drive into Chicago. And at nighttime, it's kind of hard. Well, I can't do it now. But her and her friends, I was talking to her. I says, are you going anything? She says, all our friends decided we're not getting on the trains, going to Chicago no more. We're not going into Chicago because every time you hear on the news, shootings, break-ins, robberies. We're not going into Illinois no more. That's what my sister said to me. We're not going into Illinois no more because you might not come out alive. You might get lucky and get out of there, but, it's a shame. But now let's talk about snoozing and snoring and sleeping. When we were younger, me and my wife, we had a TV in the bedroom, and I would have it on, and I'd be laying there sleeping, and she'd go to shut up, says, wait a minute, I'm watching that. She said, no, you were snoring. So finally we got rid of the TV out of the bedroom, because when you go into the bedroom to go to sleep, you go to sleep. I don't.
You shouldn't have distractions. I agree with you.
Right. But now, like when we were down at our oldest son's house down a little ways for Thanksgiving, I'm sitting on the couch, and, all of a sudden I hear him say, yeah, he's snoring, he's sleeping. I'm like, no, I'm not. So they says, yes, you are. We heard you snoring. I says, no, that was my mouth making noise.
Well, you know what? People say that. People say that a lot of times. They don't realize that they are snoring. They are falling asleep, but they're falling asleep for just seconds. And I was in a meeting, oh boy, maybe 10, 12 years ago out in Maryville. And in the middle of the meeting, one of the people in the meeting just simply all of a sudden started snoring. And he was sound asleep. For about 10 seconds and woke back up and finished he was talking in the middle of a sentence. He just like, and, he didn't realize he was out.
Yeah, the most embarrassing thing that would happen and could happen, or I think it might have been close to happening to me, is you're in a church service, and everybody's sitting there, and then all of a sudden, guess what? You're going to snore. That is, that's worse than a phone going off in a church service.
It is. But I have to tell you, over the years, I can remember a few times where priests, for example, in the Catholic Church, they'll have a special speaker or whatever. And I remember Father Homko at St. John when I was a kid. He fell asleep one time. Somebody was speaking and he was sound asleep. It was because the Mass was being celebrated. It was being celebrated by then Bishop Gritka, and Father Homko fell asleep. And I've told the story before that when I was a altar server when I was a kid, Father Homko insisted that I get a watch. And I said, well, what do I need a watch for? And he said, because you need to keep me from going on beyond 7 minutes. If the sermon goes beyond 7 minutes, I want you to cough. So one day he's giving his sermon, and it's about 3 minutes into it, and I had to cough. So he heard the cough, and he stopped, and then he said to me, cheater. So, again, it can happen anywhere. But you're right. I see people all the time, and I've done it myself, where you're sitting in especially where I sit in the very back of church because I'm an usher, and you're way back there, and sometimes you just feel that the heat kick on, or the door open in the cold, and it just gets you, and all of a sudden you're like, what? Where you at? So it
Yeah,
does
it's
happen
like
anywhere.
me when I take these students to go get tested at the site in our waiting area where I sit all the time. I usually talk to the guy that the manager of it at the window. I always chit chat with him, but I sit down. They have a TV and they have that Modern Marvels. I'm always watching, but man, I catch myself nodding out so much. I just, I had an issue there one day. I had to go to the hospital, but I always tell the guy, no instances today. But it's the thing about that. I'll be laying on the couch here at home watching the TV, and it's about nighttime, and it's something that I'll have the TV on. It'll be kind of quiet in the house, but the slightest different kind of noise or something, I wake up right away. I mean, it's a constant thing, I mean, and then my little dog, I mean, one night she jumped off the couch from me, went barking to the back door, and I'm thinking, why is she doing that? Now, I didn't hear nothing, but I opened the back door, and it's that one guy that always, about 11, 12 o'clock, walks down our alley, and I know what he does. How this dog hears that, I don't know.
Well, dogs have great hearing, and the other thing, I've had a couple of dogs now that actually will dream, and they'll bark in their dreams. So Duke used to do it quite a bit.
I've had my dog.
Sophie's done it a few times where they're when they fall asleep, a dog will start dreaming, and their dreams are supposedly so vivid that the dog thinks they're awake and will start barking and crying, and it's funny. But you're right, dogs can hear things from far longer distances than we can, and they also tune in for certain sounds. So if your dog is attracted or interested in that other dog going down the alley or going down the street, she or he will lock in on that specific
and
sound.
Another thing now, and then I'll let you go so you can talk about the wonderful 1980s. But we had a wonderful snowstorm before the 80s, but I'll let you go with that. But
we had the 67 blizzard, sure.
No, somehow in the 70s or
we had some really bad winters in the 70s, 77, 79, yes.
But now this weekend, from now till this weekend, we're going to start having some different kind of weather situation.
Cold weather.
But the thing is everybody could save money and not spend and waste money going to the Bears game and watching in case they lose. I said in case they should win. But they could save a lot of money, sit in a nice warm house in a lazy boy chair, have their bathroom and their ice box right next to them.
Well, let me ask you a quick question. You mentioned football. Let me ask you, what did you think of Notre Dame being shut out of the playoffs?
I'm kind of sad. I mean, they tried the best they could. I don't know why they got shut out.
Well, I think it's because basically the college football playoffs is such a ridiculous system right now. I think the problem is that they're trying to promote some of these conferences that nobody cares about. I mean, no one really cares about some of the conferences that are going to play in the college playoffs. The SEC and the Big Ten are the dominant conferences, and they're trying to prop up these other conferences and saying that independents don't have as much importance, and they're playing wrong. In fact, I saw a report last night that came out that said that ESPN predicts that they'll lose $50 million by not having Notre Dame play in a bowl game, because Notre Dame has said, okay, we're done. We're not playing in bowl games either. And I think Notre Dame's acting a little bit ridiculous over that. But nonetheless, they need to revamp the college football playoffs, no doubt about it.
It's not fair what they did. It's
right.
Not fair what happened.
Nope, I agree with you.
Playoffs should be playoff. Whichever team's the better and wins, go down the line and go down the ladder, and bam, the top two are the ones that did it. Don't play this favoritism. I think it's wrong. I mean, there should be equal rights to every team to be in the playoffs.
No, I agree. They really messed it up this year. Hey, thanks so much for
yeah.
calling.
Hey, everybody, due to the weather, it's going to be changing from now till the weekend. Everybody, just be safe, check on others, and just be super careful this weekend.
All right, very good. Thanks so much, Mike. Have a great day. 845-1100 is the number to call. We have callers. We do have callers. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Tom. How are we doing?
Well, I'm doing well. The annual Christmas fiasco. Christmas show is next Wednesday. You and I, by the way, probably need to get together beforehand and kind of go through some things. I'll talk to you off the air about that. But just to make sure that I know all the prompts. I've been getting all your texts, so looking forward to the show. It's always fun. People get a kick out of it. It's harmless fun, folks. We make fun of people, but we don't make fun of people. We don't do anything that's mean or nasty or hurtful, but it is kind of fun. So, what's on your mind?
If I hurt anybody, I'll apologize right now for that.
Well,
no,
I think we should begin. We'll begin each segment. With an apology next week. How about that?
Yeah. When I was a young man, my boss.
Wait a minute, I hear the YMCA playing in the background now. Young man, never mind.
Yeah. This certain individual used to sit down, and his eyes would close. So he said that there was a button on his behind that when he sat down, he sat on the button, and his eyes closed. That's called the Joe Biden syndrome. Does that make any sense?
I get it. I get it.
But anyways, let's go back to the train. Now, there's a real smart person in MX cartoons, and when he comments, he's got a memory better than an elephant. And I don't know if you read, I don't want to say his name. He had said that in Senate Bill 1 now, and I haven't read it, that you can't take seated money to pay for the train like we did. So, depending on what he said, and he's always right, when he says something, it's once in a while, and he's a dignitary somewhere in Lake County. Okay? So I'm thinking, if you can't take seated money to pay for this new South Shore extension, you're going to have a transportation tax or a South Shore tax. And this is what we have to look into, that even though we paid our part in Hammond, $27 million out of our seated money, that maybe St. John Dyer and Lowell doesn't use their seated money for that, and we're all going to be stuck with a transportation tax. But in the end,
we're stuck with it now. I mean, look, it's there. I know they're running some tests and things on the line, but look, all the people that argued 10 years ago against that train, they were right. They were right. Okay, the people that favor the train were wrong. The train is not going to bring about the kind of development that we were sold basically a bill of goods on, that it's going to create all this development. Again, I think you were the one who said this years ago to me. If it brings in so much development, then look along the existing line. Where's the development? Where is it in Hammond and East Chicago and Gary? And you're right. It just didn't. It's been kind of proven now that we were sold a bill of goods, but it is what it is, and I hope it's successful.
And I'll let you go. MX bingo, that's not to be derogatory or mean. I'm an old person, and safety was a big thing when I was younger at the mill. And I don't want one of my members ever to walk into something like that and get hurt. Your last caller said about they're not going up there anymore. There's a lot of people just not going up there anymore. Well, and
I want to ask you about two things. Speaking of the mill, one associated with the mill. So last night, Donald Trump basically said that the deal with U.S. Steel was a good, positive deal. and that steel workers rejoiced over it. What do you say about that?
I don't think it's a good deal for U.S. Steel,
But is it for the steel workers? That's the question.
but for Cleveland Cliffs, I don't know if it was such a good thing. It was no different, and I'm happy for it that U.S. Steel is doing good again. But it's no different when Ford did everything right, and Obama bailed out Chevy, and what's the other one? Dodge. But what Trump did do for the steel workers, we would be done right now. He put back the tariffs that he had in when he was in office, because what Biden took those tariffs off of aluminum and steel, and he said it's for the Trans Climate Plan. It's called he took the tariffs off the EU, European Union, because of the Transatlantic Climate Plan. And that came out in October. You can look at October 2021, 2020, 21st day, okay? It's under Fox News. When he did that, it hurt the steel workers really, really bad. So what has happened now, Trump has put them tariffs back in. And things got to start. Everything that Biden did, Trump is trying to redo. Look at gas prices. Gas prices were $5.50 a gallon. I remember going to the McDonald's on 169th.
$2.55. $2.55 this morning.
But you never hear that. That's crickets.
No,
Okay, that means nothing.
it is definitely coming down, and Trump last night said that he believes that prices will go down in many states to $1.99, which would be pretty remarkable. By the way, I want to bring this up. This is the other point. I believe he serves as the patron saint of MX cartoons, but Curly Howard of the Three Stooges actually had nocturnal lagophthalmus, which was a condition that allowed him to sleep with his eyes open. And I mean, that would be kind of a. I mean, think about it. So you're sitting there, and like Trucker Mike said, you could be in church, you could be in a meeting, and you're sitting there, and your eyes are wide open, but you're sound asleep. That would be pretty cool to have that problem, I think. But I'm sure it's complicated. I'm sure there are some downsides, but yes, Curly Howard supposedly had that.
One other thing, Trump said we're going to get the gas down to $2.50.
Yes.
And in other states, it's down to $2.30. Wisconsin's down to $2.50, under $2.50. But you got to remember here, not a gas tax pays for union labor. I'm okay with that. But Trump made a promise it would go down to $2.50, and his promise is fulfilled. If it goes down lower, it's great. But I'm really happy that I'm looking at my gas tank right now, and I'm still running around on $20 of fuel. But just to go back to the steel workers, it's good that all happened that way. Plus, the tariffs are helping us. We just got to get things rolling again to where they need to be. Because
we need to get prices down beyond gas, though. And I know that there's a connection. And as I mentioned a few weeks ago, the suspension of the tariffs with Brazil has driven down the price of orange juice. All of a sudden, it's dropped by about 30 cents a half gallon, which is a good sign. But there's a lot more that has to be done. And I think that Trump is beginning to realize that it's not, he's stabilized some things, okay, but he hasn't really brought about a lot of price reductions. And that's where people are really looking at, other than gasoline. And I agree with you. It's nice to fuel up and not pay $4 or $5 a gallon.
Well, it was $5.50 at one time. This is how smart Trump was. He hired Wilbur Ross from Inland Steel, Cleveland Cliffs, ArcelorMittal, whatever you want to do, to be in charge of dumping of steel. And the dumping stopped. The dumping had stopped. Everything was going good. And we know that Biden didn't get more votes than Obama. Okay. And another thing, too, is a big thing, this boat thing. You shot these people in a boat. Well, Obama had 550 drone strikes. Clinton take care of Gaddafi? Isn't those all war crimes that nobody talks about? The left is so uninformed. In fact, I've got a Christmas for the left people. The people on the left, I actually went out and bought them something.
Well,
I'm not going to call
right.
them all
We'll
out.
see it. We'll see it next week. Don't give it away. Don't give it
I
away.
got to go.
All right. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. 845-1100 is the number to call. We're going to take a quick break. It's the morning call with Tom Dabertin on WJOB, 1230 AM, 104.7 FM. When we come back, we're going to do traffic and weather again. And don't forget, at 7 o'clock, Mon Hanley is going to join me. We're going to talk about some things that happened in the fall of the 1980s, the early 1980s, which are really, truly kind of terrifying and have been glossed over by the media and historians for many years. We're going to talk about those issues. We'll be right back. All right, folks, let's go directly to traffic and weather. Traffic in northwest Indiana, I-65, 80, 94. The Indiana Toll Road, Klein Avenue, all look pretty decent this morning. A little bit of a slowdown on the toll road at the toll plaza out in Portage. One of these days, Indiana will go to open tolling, but hasn't happened yet. Every other state has it. But over across the line in Illinois, things are not bad with two exceptions. So you have I-57 north of 294. There is a problem due to police activity. There was a shooting this morning about 5:31. But the big story is the Dan Ryan going into the city. It is now backed up beyond the entrance from the Chicago Skyway. So if you're trying to head into the city this morning, you can just forget the Dan Ryan and the Skyway, frankly. Get off. You can use, if you're already caught in traffic, get off and take State Street. It looks pretty decent, although it's building. Or cut over to Lakeshore Drive. Your best bet to downtown this morning because it is really just a traffic jam. Otherwise, traffic in the city, no surprise, the Circle interchange is kind of backed up because of the problems leading into it. The Kennedy is kind of a mess, and the Eisenhower doesn't look too great either. And the Eisenhower is backed up in both directions, so you're not going to do very well getting to or from the city on that road. So not a great day for traffic by any means. With that, let's take a look at weather, and it doesn't sound like weather is going to be a great day either.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're at 37 degrees with highs of 35 and lows of 17. We're going to have rain mixing with then changing to snow this morning up to 1 inch. It's going to be cloudy and windy, and then later tonight a couple of evening flurries. Otherwise, mostly cloudy and colder. And then tomorrow on Thursday, we'll be having highs of 26 and lows of 22. Should be mostly cloudy and very cold. And then Friday, we'll be having highs of 31 and lows of 5 and should be mostly cloudy with a couple of flurries.
And the weekend looks very cold. The weekend looks like a very, very cold pocket of air coming down from Canada. So, Trucker Mike, I think, had a good point about staying home and inside to watch games rather than to be outside. But it's going to be a very cold weekend, no doubt about it. But, one thing about weather in northwest Indiana and the Chicago area, whatever it is today, it can change. I saw that next week we're going to be in the 40s. So it'll be short-lived. Whatever we have, it changes. A lot of the ice and snow that fell the last week or so is melting this morning, so be careful. There's some slippery spots outside. 845-1100 is the number to call. We have a caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hey, did you hear the story about Pritzker and how he's going to let out 1,700 criminal illegal aliens?
No, I haven't.
Out of jail? Oh, you haven't heard that one?
No, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, yep. He's just going to let him free. And then yesterday he signed some bill to where ICE can't conduct operations basically anywhere anymore.
Well, keep in mind, though, Pritzker can sign all he wants, but the supremacy clause of the Constitution basically is the basis for Fed. The Feds can go anywhere they want. He can't stop them. He can sign all the bills he wants, but he can't stop them.
Yeah, it's just like, just stop that throwing fuel on the fire, man.
Well, he has his eyes. He has his eyes set on running for president. He thinks he's going to be president. He's presidential material. I think he's one of the worst governors in the history of the United States for any state. But and by the way, I mentioned last week when I was on, or Friday. I mentioned it Friday when I was on. Newsweek magazine conducted a poll of Illinois residents, and 60% say that Pritzker is going in the wrong direction. On a variety of issues, but he's still going to get reelected.
Oh, come on. If you're a resident of Cook County and you got those tax bills them poor people got, how could you vote for that moron?
You know why?
They are crippling them people.
So I'll tell you what. Who's worse, Pritzker or the Republican Party in Illinois, who puts guys like that Bailey up as a candidate, who's just a complete moron? I mean, he's as big a moron as Pritzker. So you have a race to the bottom to see which bigger moron you can elect.
It is. It's just like New York, a race to the bottom. Those candidates had to be the worst candidates you could ever imagine, and on both sides.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys ain't got a better bench than this. It's unbelievable.
Well, look, you're absolutely right. Look what New York put up against Mandani. Okay, you had Sliwa, Curtis Sliwa. All right, he had no business being in that race, none at all. He stayed in right till the end, and he had no chance of winning, zero. And what did he get? 9% of the vote, some ridiculously low number. It amazes me that you look at a state like Illinois, and you would think that they could find a decent gubernatorial candidate on both sides of the aisle. I mean, Pritzker is the guy that basically was trying to buy the U.S. Senate seat that Blagojevich went to prison for. He was the guy.
The FBI has him on tape.
Right.
They have him on tape.
And everybody seems to forget that. You know, Pritzker has been a disaster, repeatedly on just about every issue. And again, I read the poll last week. I brought it up on Friday, and voters are not happy with his stand on immigration. Voters aren't happy with his stand on crime. They're not happy with his stand on taxes. They're not happy with all of these things. So he's got 60% of the voter overall does not approve of his performance. Yet, you look at who they're putting up against. This Bailey, I forget his first name. It's Darren or Damien. Darren Bailey. I mean, the guy is a complete buffoon. And so Pritzker's sitting back saying, "Well, I'm going to win a third term, and I'm doing so well. I'm going to run for president of the United States." I mean, he shouldn't be president. He shouldn't be president of a glee club in high school. He is just a disaster.
No, and like I said, I think we talked about last week too. Those problems are going to bleed over here, and we live next to a hellhole, people.
So you know what? You're right about that, and I've read some of the postings that, for example, on what's going on in Hammond, Indiana, and the people who are now posting about the way they believe, snow plowing should occur and salting of streets and some of the things that they're looking for. And you're right. There are a lot of people locating here from Illinois that you really don't want. I mean, the stuff that they're posting is just ridiculous. The same thing with the what's going on in Whiting, or I looked at the one for Munster, and even some of those posts. I mean, some of these people, look, you're moving out of Illinois. You're trying to get away from that stuff, and then you expect anything and everything to be done by local government in Indiana. You're just bringing the problems right across. But again, people who are saying that why doesn't the city of here as an example, why doesn't the city of Hammond shovel the sidewalks in front of people's homes?
Because it's not there. Come on.
Well, but there are countless people. In fact, I even responded and I said, look. The sidewalk in front of your home is still your responsibility. It is you've basically given a public easement, a public right of way, but it's still your responsibility. It's still your property. And if somebody falls down and breaks their leg, they can sue you. And I had 5 people basically respond and tell me that I was an idiot and I was totally wrong, and am I a shill for the insurance industry? And I mean, just crazy responses. I mean, people saying, "Oh no, that's not true," and they have to take care of it, and it's not my problem. I mean, folks, it's just people have become extremely dependent on government, and we need to get beyond it. Yeah, they are. They're lazy. We need to get beyond this idea that government does everything. I mean, government is not the center of your universe. It shouldn't be. Okay. Government should be there to support your lives, but it shouldn't be there to control your lives. And for that matter, I have a problem with people who spend all day watching Fox News or watching CNN, because all they become obsessed with the idea that government rules their lives, and it doesn't. And it doesn't rule it on a local level either. I mean, people want to blame, again, some of the postings that I've read lately just concern me. Go out and shovel your snow. If the snow plow comes by and it dumps snow in front of your house, oh, I'm sorry that happened, but go clear it.
And if you have to, go chip in with a neighbor and do it together. And
Yeah, stand out there and visit with your neighbors. Do it together. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
but
do it
don't
together.
expect government to do absolutely everything for you. And it's just crazy. I mean, I another posting about, I talked about the healthcare crisis, and people posting, and why can't we have government controlled healthcare in the United States? It works in Canada, and as I mentioned
No,
before, it doesn't work in Canada. Canadians hate it. People are leaving Canada in droves, especially younger people, because they're terrified of their nationalized healthcare system. They're not in favor of it at all. So I don't know. We've created this mess. We need to get away from it. That's really where we're at.
Yeah, amen to that. Yep, I'll have a good one, Tom.
Thanks for calling. We have another caller, and then we're going to take a break, and then Mon Hanley's here, and we want to talk about nuclear war. So keep tuned right here. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hey, Tom. Dave from Gary.
Hey, Dave. How are you?
How you doing? Good. Hey, you and I ended a conversation, just to let people know, you and I ended a conversation last week. We didn't agree on a whole lot, right? But how did we end it? Wishing each other well and have happy holidays and health.
Well, absolutely. And in that case,
I think that's how it's supposed to be.
Right. Well, in that case, I think there was just a misunderstanding of some points. But look, the problem this day and age is people can't agree on anything, and they get so extremely upset if you don't agree with their point. Like the woman who posted that the city of Whiting should buy Cub Cadets, and they should clear all the sidewalks in Whiting. And I said, well, where's the money going to come from that? And it's like, well, you just think you know it all. It's like, no, I'm asking a legitimate question. Where would the money come from that? People who want to blame everything. I mean, even, look, the issue of the train. All right, the issue of the train, yes. Probably not the investment that we needed to make on the Westlake corridor. I still agree the double track and some of the stuff that happened out toward you was necessary for safety reasons. But the Westlake corridor, I don't think is going to bring the development that some people think it is. But we're going to have to live with it. Okay, so we'll agree to disagree at times, but this day and age, it's like, well, I don't agree with you, so I can't talk to you.
Right, and it's so extreme. Like, I'm a Democrat, right? But I'm lumped in with Brandon Johnson. I don't know. That guy's a one and done, as far as I'm concerned.
I hope.
Well, it's and all these other. Oh, yeah, you're for Nancy Pelosi. Well, I don't live in California, and I've never voted for Nancy Pelosi. And after 75 years old, I don't know if any congressman or senator that's worth their weight in salt. So because they just can't relate to the younger demographic, and that's just the way I look at it.
Dave, you're a bright guy. You're a bright guy. Don't you think that we really at some point have to have term limits in Congress?
I preach from the rooftops that we do have term limits, and they're called elections, but it just doesn't work when you get the Maxine Waters and the Grassley that's 92 years old.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck Grassley.
And the McConnells and yeah, I know. He's
going to run for re-election. He's going to be 100 years old when he ends his next term. 100.
Exactly right. I'm going to finish with this, and I'm looking forward to listening to you and Mont about the nuclear potential catastrophes that potentially could have happened in the United States. But I just want to – I hear the callers calling in, and, not happy, they're grieving, and that's what WJOE is for, right? But you are the only one – that's talking about SB1, and I feel like I'm Chicken Little. I'm screaming it from the rooftops, and nobody's listening or knows. This is going to hurt every minute, not just East Chicago, Gary, and Hammond. This is going to hurt every municipality,
absolutely,
and every school district.
Absolutely, and I've talked to some of those South County school districts and some of those South County communities. But here's what's crazy, Dave. You would think that everybody would join together. You'd have this chorus of local government officials all putting it on the front burner, and you just don't hear it. By the way, I want to mention to you, because you and I are both registered Democrats, you might enjoy parts, because I have to say there's a lot of political slant in here as well. But parts of Tulsi Gabbard's book that I quoted from this morning about nuclear war, she actually wrote a pretty good book because she talks about some of the same things you and I have identified with that are just wrong with government. You know, the fact that there are people that are so old they don't even know what they're talking about anymore, that are still in Congress. She talks about, you know, how the Democrats and the Republicans basically many times are basically in bed with each other on the same issues. It's not a bad book. I mean, again, you have to read through. You have to strain out some of the stuff. I mean, obviously, she was pushing very heavily.
Any book written by a Politico or any sort of elected official, you have to kind of filter it. So.
Right. But she brings up some logical arguments. Again, she's pretty pro-Trump in the book. And you know, kind of keeps on saying, well, this wouldn't have happened under Donald Trump. Well, it's like you don't know that, but there are some very interesting stories that she tells, and some very unsettling stories, if you will, about when she was in Congress. How, you know, she would basically be called and told, you know, she was berated by Michelle Obama's press secretary for a position that she took because she opposed something. I can't even remember what it was. And she said, you know, think about this for a minute. She said, you know, think about where we're at as a government, that the press secretary for the first lady, who's not elected, basically called and said, how dare you vote against, you know, this because we want this. And her point was, wait a minute, I was elected by the citizens of Hawaii to represent them. You weren't elected by anybody, and you're working for somebody who's married to the guy that got elected. So why is this an issue? I mean, it's an interesting book. You might like it.
Well, I'm looking forward to listening to you and Mont's conversation about who had the finger on the button. So.
Well, Mont is right here, so we're going to take a quick break, Dave, and when we come back, Mont Hanley is going to be on with me.
Have a good holiday, Tom.
You as well, Dave. Take care. So let's take a quick break. We're going to come back, and Mont Hanley's here. We're going to talk about nuclear war and some of the things that you may not realize how close we actually came to nuclear war in the 1980s. It's terrifying. We'll be right back. Good morning, sir. All right, we're back, folks. And joining me, of course, is Mont Hanley. Mont, longtime caller. A lot of people know him. And great to have you here this morning, Mont. And Mont's not on yet. He is, let's see if he, can you hear now?
Try one more time.
All right. I heard you.
Yeah,
so
I can hear.
Okay,
Okay,
now
thank
we can
you.
hear. There we go. All right. But before we do anything, I'm just going to bring up traffic again real fast because I've been keeping an eye on the Dan Ryan Expressway, which looks like it's just a disaster this morning. And all I can say, folks, is you probably want to avoid getting on the Dan Ryan, and that means avoid the Chicago Skyway as well. I-57 remains a problem as well, right around 294 because of an early morning shooting. But if you're headed into the city this morning, give yourself some extra time. Take Lakeshore Drive. Lakeshore Drive is flowing pretty well, and even State Street isn't doing that bad, although it's building because, of course, traffic is jumping off the Dan Ryan. So just be careful out there, and weather-wise, you need to be careful as well, correct?
Yep.
So just be careful today. Rain now and then turning to snow?
Rain and then snow.
Yeah, so not a great day. Wet blanket day. Anyway, we have a great guest. Mont, good morning. Great to have you here. So we've talked a little bit about this on the air before when you've called in. And first of all, there are a series of incidents that occur in the early 1980s that put us right on the brink of nuclear Armageddon, where, I mean, if you want to talk about it, our feet are literally hanging over the ledge. That's how close we are. We're within a few minutes of nuclear annihilation.
I would say it even started before the early 80s. I mean, there were incidents back in the 60s, like where nuclear warheads were lost during plane crashes. I mean,
the B-52 off of South Carolina, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't know this until I actually read this statement. One of the warheads was never found. It was buried in swampy land someplace in North Carolina, I believe.
Yes, North Carolina, right. And they're still, right to this day, they still don't know where it's at. And then there was also the crash of the B-52 in the Azores.
Correct, the Palomar,
right.
Spain. There was a warhead. They found 3 of the 4 in the wreckage, but the 4th one was like they couldn't find it for months, and they find it in a deep trench in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, just terrifying. And then of course, if you move the clock up, I mean, these are accidents. These aren't nuclear exchanges, but you move the clock up, you get to September 1980, and the accident that happened in Damascus. Arkansas, 9 megaton nuclear warhead. Basically, a guy working on a Titan II missile drops a ratchet wrench, and it punctures part of the sidewall of the missile, punctures the tank, and it starts leaking. And about 3 a.m., this happens about 6:30 at night, and about 3 a.m., the missile actually explodes. It throws the launch door off the top of the silo. It actually throws that to its side, and the warhead gets launched into the air. And the warhead that was on there was designed that once it started moving forward, it was armed. And basically, somehow by the grace of God, it lands in a cornfield.
Yeah.
But they can't find it.
So you read many, many times about these different incidents that, they had all these fail-safes. In one instance I read where one of the nuclear warheads had 6 fail-safe safety features. In many cases, 5 of the 6 failed. And there was just the one that actually protected from the explosion.
And that was the case in Arkansas, where you're right. There's all these fail-safes, and there's one that they nicknamed the LeMay switch because Curtis LeMay said he didn't trust the other switches, so he actually added one more switch to this warhead, and it's the one switch that basically doesn't engage and protects everybody from this massive explosion. And again, they're driving around in these cornfields in the middle of the night trying to find this thing. They finally find it and realize that just by luck, it doesn't explode. what's really interesting, and there's a book called Command and Control. It was a bestseller that talks about the details of the incident, and it talks about, among other things, that Jimmy Carter, who's president at the time and running for re-election against Ronald Reagan, is asked, should we notify the governor of Arkansas about what's going on? And Clinton said, or Carter says, "No, I don't trust that guy." And it's Bill Clinton, and he doesn't tell him.
Yeah.
So here there's this chance that the state of Arkansas would have basically been eliminated.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the biggest bomb that we literally fielded at that point in time.
If it happened before Clinton became president and Hillary Clinton became first lady, that might not have been a loss.
There would have been some upsides. You're right. I mean, there's an upside to everything, I guess. But it would have caused severe damage or radiation damage from St. Louis south to Mobile, Alabama, and it would if you just draw this giant circle, you'd get an idea of. I mean, it would have taken out Mississippi, Alabama, a good portion of Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, and even Kentucky and Missouri.
Well, there's a lot of people, and I know this content is not like sunshiny morning kind of like talk show host kind of stuff, but there's a lot of history here that we just narrowly missed, like avoiding ourselves. And I was telling you earlier, like when Reagan first was given a president's perspective on the nuclear race with the Russians, the Soviets rather, he realized right away there's no winning this at all.
Yeah, there's no winning it at all, and you're absolutely right. And we want to get to the real scary moments, which is Operation Ryan and Able Archer, and so.
Linux too. I mean, we have to throw Linux in there as well.
Right. So you've got these incidents, these series of incidents that happened in the early 1980s, and I just want listeners and callers to know. And by the way, we'll take your calls 845-1100. But you, at the time, you were assigned to a Pershing II nuclear missile battery.
I was a private MP. Went through basic training in the fall of 1982. Got assigned. Here's an interesting side note. I got assigned to a Army depot, a Pershing II missile site, where the largest, military drug bust in military history happened. Like 80-some MPs got busted for drugs.
Which is really terrifying.
And so I was one of those brand new, right out of the boot camp kind of replacements that went to this site. And this was right at the middle of, nuclear war demonstrations. You had the Baader-Meinhof gang rolling around, like kidnapping soldiers in Germany. A lot of like activists working the anti-nuclear project at that point.
And the Pershing IIs were stationed in Germany and other European countries. It was brand new, but it was like a 6-minute flight time between launch
and Moscow
to detonation in Moscow. Yeah.
And it scared the bejesus out of the Russians. It totally, like the top tier, folks at the top, they were beside themselves with paranoia.
Yeah, because this was every bit as threatening as the Cuban Missile Crisis in the United States. I mean, we basically stood up to the Soviets and said you can't put missiles in Cuba because the flight time to the United States was a few minutes long.
Yeah,
and we did the same thing in the 1980s by putting these Pershing II batteries in.
It's funny
Europe.
because I mean, you see history and you see it repeat itself over and over again, and this kind of reminds me of the whole redistricting thing with the Democrats and the Republicans right now. Democrats did it, nobody complained. The Russians actually had a similar missile to the Pershing II, and they were pushing it into East Germany and Czechoslovakia, and they had no problem with it. But once, President Reagan and his military, came in and put the Pershing IIs into Western Europe, they had, we can't tolerate that. It's
right. Well, even though back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, it's very rarely reported that we had missiles in Turkey back in 1962 that basically had the same impact and the same effect that the missiles going into Cuba were, but nobody ever talked about that.
Right.
And of course, that was a side note of the the agreement on the Cuban Missile Crisis that we would withdraw those missiles from Turkey, but we never admitted publicly that we had them, and there was never any real public debate or discussion.
Well, the Soviets, Operation Ryan, really kicked off this paranoia for the leadership, and then, they had Soviet agents probably in Valpo at the Minuteman missile sites, and anywhere else there was a Minuteman missile site in the Midwest. They were here reporting. They were looking for what they called indicators. That was the word that was used.
They were obsessed with the idea that there was going to be this bolt out of the blue
offensive launch. Yep, they thought the U.S. was going to try to do a headshot, is what they called it. They wanted to kill the leadership.
And it's interesting because I read a book last spring by Oleg Gordievsky, who is basically a very well-known double agent, and he had a firsthand knowledge and firsthand view of what was going on. So Operation Ryan, as you said, is this global data gathering exercise by the Soviets, because they're convinced that we're going to launch a first strike.
And maybe a lot of people. I've read this, I've seen this. They credit him for being sort of the back channel between the two during this Able Archer crisis. You heard for decades that it was Sweden. Sweden was our back channel. There's one reference to that I can find, and I can't find anybody else that will confirm that it was Swedish diplomats that were doing the back channeling for us, because we didn't have a direct. That, I don't know, did you see the reference to who they sent, who Reagan sent to Russia to meet with Andropov?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who it was now.
It was Harriman.
Oh, that's right.
He was 91.
That's right.
And that was the only person that had a decent relationship, because he did the Lend-Lease program with Stalin.
Right.
In the 40s.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, so you're relying on a guy who's in his 90s to be the
maybe
the
he should represent it.
Now, I will mention in Gordievsky's book, he mentions that the Danish government was used largely as a
cover,
and a conduit for him to basically channel information. So, I think that part of the reason why the Danes got such credit for it, for diffusing Able Archer, is because Gordievsky's actually the guy that's pumping the information in and out.
So at the same time, the Soviets were using the Line X strategy with their KGB operatives, and I'll just tell you, I think in reading some of the stories, some of the KGB agents were this is BS. Why are we doing this stuff? And they were feeding their superiors back in Moscow information like, oh, the BBC is offering wants a blood drive. This has got to be an indicator that they're prepping for war.
Yeah, absolutely. So the agents are making up stories that basically they believe will play well in Moscow. So they're hyping everything. And so when there's the incident where Reagan is testing the mic for his Saturday broadcast, for example, his Saturday radio broadcast, and he says, testing, we're going to bomb Moscow in 12 minutes or something, whatever it was. And that, of course, is captured through Operation Ryan.
Do you think that was just off the cuff, or do you think that was scripted? Because he and Casey were doing psychological operations for sure.
I believe that it wasn't as innocent as Reagan claimed it was. I believe you're right. I think it was to send a message.
Wild Bill
to the
Casey,
Soviets.
who's was part of the original OSS when the CIA started, was Reagan's guy for the CIA, and he said everyone's getting too soft. He had too many, Ivy League educated CIA agents. He wanted them to be tougher and back out in the field and doing what the OSS was doing, like jumping into France and liberating villages and stuff like that. He was really that kind of guy. And so they were definitely doing these psychological operations. And that started early in 1983 with the Fleet X. They were like the Pacific Fleet war games.
Right.
They were purposely going into Russian waters. They were flying over Kamchatka, which was a Russian. They captured it from the Japanese after World War II.
But it was Russian. It
was
Russian
Russian
help.
site. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what led to Andropov saying, shoot it on sight if they come into Russian airspace. So that led right up to the KLA
Right.
007 flight being shot out of the air with a congressman on board.
Right, and we had just, in fact, you mentioned about the war games in the Pacific. We had just sent, I believe, a squadron of 18 F-14s had just flown over the Russian-held islands, and so the Russians, the Soviets, were paranoid because they had just seen basically these U.S. fighter jets off of aircraft carriers flying over their land, and they were sure that the next plane may be something else. Yeah. And of course, it ends up that it's a.
And it was most definitely psychological operation because they were probing the perimeter. They knew that the Soviets had basically blind spots on their coast, and they were testing it to see when the alarms would be triggered.
And by the way, those blind spots still exist today. The book that I mentioned last week by Annie Jacobson, Nuclear War, a scenario, she points out that to this day, the Russian early warning radar system can mistake serious clouds for contrails from missiles. We have a caller. Let's go to that caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hey, it's Mad Mac, not calling for, well, I was going to call, but you're having technical difficulty on the air. You got is Deedlow in the studio? Because there's someone kicking a wire or something. You've been off the air twice now, and now you're running commercials over you guys.
Yeah, we were off the air. I had to play commercials to get us back on. So hopefully after those commercials, we are back on.
Okay, I'll ask you a quick question for you two nuclear geniuses. You know when they shoot a regular missile up in the air and it lands and hits the ground and explodes because the explosives then ignite on contact? Is a nuclear missile different that it has to have like a little bomb on top of the nuclear thing before it hits the ground to trigger it to explode? Is that how that works?
They're different. I mean, there's different scenarios. Some of them are pressure and some of them are, I don't know, switches, electronic switches of some sort.
Yeah, when the thermonuclear explosion though is basically begun by the ignition of a fissionable explosion, which then causes the hydrogen bomb, the thermonuclear explosion.
Yeah, if they had,
so it's not on impact. It's triggered by
if they were impact
itself,
triggers,
right?
we would have probably lost half the southeast at this point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the incident in Damascus, Arkansas, if it was on impact, we would have been done, and we would have been
in
done
North Carolina.
in North Carolina.
There was a crash with 2 nuclear warheads on it, and then there was another one with 4.
Yeah, that's right. There was another one. It was somewhere in the south, right?
It was North Carolina again.
Yeah. So we've lost several nuclear weapons over the years, Mad Mac, and so it's not on impact. You're right. It's
so that's why that's why they don't explode.
Usually, in fact, as I understand it, most nuclear weapons are designed to explode at some altitude. They don't explode at ground level. They usually explode at 1,000 feet, 5,000 feet, which maximizes the shock waves to go out and causes more decimation, to be honest with you.
Okay, and then you mentioned that Curtis LeMay guy. Is he also the guy that wrote Superfly, or is that a different Curtis? And I'll just hang up.
No, that's a different Curtis. I'll tell you right now. Curtis LeMay. So Curtis LeMay was a real hawk.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about him. We have a little echo now. Just check. I think maybe the call didn't hang up completely. There we go. And Curtis LeMay, no question, big war hawk. He was, the commanding officer of 8th Air Force during World War II. He basically comes up with some of the fire bombings of some of the German cities, and then he takes over basically, I think, 12th Air Force in the Pacific and leads the fire bombing of Tokyo. And after World War II, he becomes the head of Strategic Air Command.
Yep.
But at the same time, LeMay publicly, does state at times about use of nuclear weapons. Privately, LeMay probably has more respect for nuclear weapons than most people in the U.S. Armed Forces, because he's the one that says, look, you've got to have redundant systems to protect these warheads from blowing up on accident.
Correct.
He also chastises Kennedy when Kennedy in 1961 asks him to draw plans for a bolt out of the blue, what it would take, and LeMay says, "You've got to be crazy. You'd kill 100 million people in the first 30 minutes. It's not winnable." And against the Soviet Union, he says, "You can use them elsewhere, but you can't use them against the Soviets." And that's where Bobby Kennedy says, "We'll destroy you." And all of a sudden, LeMay's whole reputation for the rest of his career and the rest of his life is tarnished by some operatives, basically from the Kennedy family, who constantly haunt him and say, this guy's a warmonger. You can't trust him.
He was also the founder of Air Force Academy, right? And
if he wasn't, he was certainly one of the moving forces. Yeah, he was. But again, he's an interesting character, and I've read a couple of biographies on him, and one, in fact, came oddly enough. As much as I show my disdain for Governor Pritzker, the Pritzker Military Museum in Chicago is actually a really good facility and good place to find good books about war. I mean, and they were one of the ones that recommended one of the books that I read on LeMay. And so, but yeah, LeMay is, he runs later in his career. He runs as vice president with George Wallace, and he gets a bad rap. And people, of course, say that he must have been in favor of Wallace's segregationist strategies, and LeMay actually wasn't. LeMay, like Patton in World War II, said, "Hey, if African American soldiers can fly planes, he was part of the group that promotes the Tuskegee Airmen."
Yeah, I think I remember you talking about this maybe a few weeks ago, and about who was desegregating like the military and stuff like that. And
it's
LeMay is one of the main characters.
It's Patton and LeMay who both say they bleed the same red blood, use them, and it's Eisenhower. Among others, who say no, we can't do that.
And MacArthur was a big segregationist.
Yeah, MacArthur. When the more you learn about MacArthur, the less you like him.
Yeah,
I mean, he was a pompous, arrogant.
Sure, he was. He would have fit in really well with, Monty over in Britain, and
he was cut from the same mold.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but getting back to nuclear war, and then in 1983.
Yeah.
So we've gotten to the Korean Airlines crash.
Okay, so Fleet X started in I think March of that year. I think there were some issues through the summer as well. I think there was Grenada. There was the Beirut barracks bombing. I think we thought that the Russians were involved through their Syrian proxies initially, but I think now most people think it's probably Iran and their proxies.
Right.
So there was a lot of tension back and forth, and then I think it was August 30th or September 1st, depending on the dateline, the KLA downing, happened. Prior to KLA flight going off like 300 miles from their stated route, there had been a listening aircraft, essentially. The U.S. They were in the same area. They weren't crossing boundaries, but they were getting pretty close, and the people at the Russian station there were like, let's keep an eye on this. 30 minutes after that left, the KLA came in, and they thought they were coming back for another bite of the apple, and so that's what triggered the Russians to follow this commercial jetliner with 260 some people on board, and they shot it out of the air. And the pilot basically said, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but it was recorded all around. It was reported all around the world that he said something like, "They've been, eliminated," or something like that.
Yeah, target eliminated, and that gets to the point where Able Archer, and we're going to take a break and come back, but let's first just explain. Able Archer is this war game that basically the United States and NATO is going to play, and it's largely, it is just a rehearsal, but people like Margaret Thatcher, the then Prime Minister of Great Britain, are involved in this. I mean, this is this worldwide scenario game that we're playing to make sure that we have all the coordination and preparedness. And of course, On the other side of the Iron Curtain, the Soviets are sitting there and they're saying, "Oh my gosh,
This is all cover for a launch of
Right.
an invasion.
this is the real thing."
Yeah.
And so we're going to leave it with that. We're going to take a break and we're going to come right back. Mon Hanley sitting in with me. You're listening to the Morning Call on WJLB. We'll be right back after these commercial announcements. All right, folks, we're back with Mon Hanley. So we've gotten to the Korean Airlines crash, and there's an incident that involves a Colonel Petrov.
So late, I want to say August of 1983, the Soviets put some new satellites up in the air, and they are supposed to watch the horizon above North America to see if there's any launches, and that would an early warning system and give them like an extra 6 minutes or something like that, enough time to get the leadership in bunkers and stuff. So this Colonel Petrov was actually one of the architects and builders of this system, and he just happened to get called in this night. Somebody was out sick or something like that, and he got called in. It's a base about 80 miles south of Moscow, and it's like the typical, Dr. Strangelove setup with like the,
Right.
the big theater, the Nassau Theater. And he gets a little like Captain Kirk chair, and all of his little minions are watching all these like indicator buttons and stuff. And I think sometime after midnight, if I'm not mistaken, it was sometime around dawn in North America, an indicator goes off that a launch has taken place. And he thinks for a second, he says, he admits he was scared out of his mind. But there's only one initially, and he's like, there's got to be a glitch in the system. Let's play it out. Nobody's warned, and he knows that eventually the higher ups are going to get notified of this alarm. But he plays it out, and it fades, and they turn off the system and reboot it. Isn't that crazy? They have to do that for these missile systems too. You have to reboot your computer.
Yeah, I mean, so people will say, well, you guys had problems with technical difficulties at WJOB. Okay, so the Soviets basically are having to turn their systems.
Did you turn it off and turn it back on?
Just terrifying.
So okay, once scary, twice, yeah, a little scarier. On the third time, he's like thinking, what the hell here? What was happening was the satellites were mistaking sunlight bouncing off of high cirrus clouds as launches.
Right.
And the only thing that saved us from a nuclear Armageddon at that moment, because anybody else who was sitting in that chair wouldn't have had the wherewithal to realize the, inconsistencies with the system. He just happened to be the architect of it, so he knew that it could be reading, sunlight. And if it had been a launch, why would they only launch 3? Why would they not launch 3,000 or 30,000, If this was going to be a pre-strike, why would they only launch 3? That seems insane. So he didn't, trigger the nuclear Armageddon, and he would have been the guy to do it, sitting in his little Captain Kirk chair.
Yeah, I mean, so again, just for listeners and viewers to understand, that's how close we came, because the right guy is sitting in that chair.
Yeah.
Basically, the Soviets don't launch their nuclear missiles at us.
And
false information.
He did defy orders, because you were supposed to
he was
launch.
supposed to launch, right? He was supposed to launch, right? He was at the point where, if based on the information, he should have launched.
Do you know why he got drummed out of the Russian military, the Soviet military?
No, go ahead. Why?
Well, he's on the phone and he's watching these things happen and turning the computer off and stuff. He got drummed out of the military because he wasn't documenting everything in his log. He was supposed to through all this sit down and write his log out. And so
that's right. I do remember reading that now. Yes. They say that he wasn't keeping a complete log.
10 years after this happened, he was on a quarter, a fractional of a pension that he would have gotten if he had been, ushered out of the military, the way he should have been, living in a little ghetto block in Moscow, and he had a little trophy from Kofi Annan saying basically thank you for not destroying the planet.
Yeah, I mean it's absurd to think that here's the guy that basically keeps us from a nuclear exchange, the right guy in the right place at the right time.
Yeah,
and so
this is now
that's
mid-September.
Mid-September.
Yeah,
right.
So you go October, you have the Beirut bombing, you have Grenada, and I can recall this weekend. This all happened on one weekend. We're all on our posts, and I happened to be in the NCO bar, when all this stuff came up, and we were immediately locked down. And everyone thought, okay, this is something's happening. We're invading Grenada, which was a Cuban and a Soviet backed leader who'd taken over 3 or 4 years earlier, who was basically trying to turn it into a little communist, Caribbean island.
Right.
And then the Beirut bombing thing was even worse because there was so much loss of American so many Marines were killed.
283, something like that,
and a bunch of French paratroopers too. So it was pretty bad, And that's a great book too. There's a great book about the Marines stationed at the Beirut airport. That's a phenomenal book.
Really?
And it basically talks about them being, target practice, essentially, because basically the way the Beirut airport was situated, all the hills surrounded the Beirut airport, and they were getting pot shots at them all the time. And they weren't even allowed to carry live rounds in their rifles.
Wow.
Crazy.
Wow.
Absolutely
yeah,
crazy.
Absolutely nuts. I mean, you're in Beirut and you can't carry live rounds to protect yourself.
Yeah.
That's
because they didn't want an incident. That's what they were most afraid of.
right.
So they were just sitting targets, essentially.
So here we are. We're in November now.
Yeah. So now,
We
fast
have
forward.
Able Archer.
November 7th through 11th was the dates of the Able Archer. Again, Soviets are beside themselves with fear that this is just a cover for, actual invasion. They thought, their days were numbered. This involved all the militaries of Western Europe, Britain, Germany, France, the U.S. definitely heavily involved, and the Pershing II missiles. We were on a convoy, and again, I became the driver because I was the company clerk for the MP company, and that made me the driver for the MP commander and the commander of the battalion company that we were served under. And this is 1983, so there weren't any cell phones, and nobody held a smartphone so they can get emails back and forth. Every communication was over a two-way radio. Basically, we had the same communications that the people who landed on Normandy had, essentially.
Wow.
And there was 4 of us in the Jeep that I was driving, the commander, both commanders, and then there was a warrant officer who I understood to be like the head mechanic for the Pershing II missiles. And they were getting calls from their leadership giving them updates on, okay, so we found that the Russians or the Soviets have now, gone to like level 4 or whatever the maximum level in East Germany, and they're basically on their planes right now, and they're preparing to invade. And so here we are convoying through, the Black Forest of, on the Autobahn.
With nuclear missiles.
Well, I still can't tell you if that's the case or not, because you look at the literature and a lot of declassified stuff that has come out doesn't really say that they were in country yet. And I speculate because Casey and Reagan were having such fun with these psychological operations that, I hope to God they weren't like decoys, but maybe they were, because they were trying to like freak the Soviets out.
Yeah, and by the way, I just pulled up at the same time this is all going on. Yuri Andropov is the premier of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
He is in Moscow's Central Critical Hospital, where he basically is confined in the fall of 1983, and he spends the rest of his life there. In January, in fact, his health deteriorates to the point where he literally is not conscious any longer.
Yeah.
And so that's who's leading the Soviet Union, and he is totally paranoid. He's afraid of another Hungarian uprising that occurred in 1956. So he's paranoid. He believes that the U.S. is going to launch this attack, and he's basically issued orders that we need to basically beat them to the first strike.
So, some background on this, too, is, the Soviets were way behind on computer technology, way behind. And through this, the Soviets had been, doing this project that's called Linex now. They had KGB agents coming to the West and stealing industrial secrets and, secrets about computer systems and navigation systems and all that kind of stuff. They were very successful at this. This was not known to the U.S. It was the French president, Mitterrand, who told Reagan in a private meeting in, I want to say, Canada at some point in late 81, 82 about this.
Yeah, they're actually among other things, for listeners and viewers to understand, they're so behind that they literally are sending their agents to places like Radio Shack and buying computers because
Right.
they have nothing. They're so backward at this.
So what happens when Reagan comes back and talks to his cabinet and Bill Casey? They decide well, let's not tear it down. This is a great system for us to give them misinformation, disinformation, and malware. I mean, I don't know if that term had been coined at that point yet, but they actually did start feeding them bad information. And so I just wonder how much of this they had gotten. And there was actually an incident. It might have been later than this November of 1983, but malware is CIA credited malware with blowing up a Siberian natural gas pipeline that had been installed. And they had stolen some of the secrets to run it,
Right. And again, we're giving the Soviets all this misinformation, which is just feeding into
more
into their paranoia.
But they knew that they were so way behind on the technology side of this that was also feeding into their. And these were all of these people, and Reagan, Casey, sending Harriman in. I mean, these were all people from the World War II era.
Right.
But on the other side, these were all people who had worked for Stalin, so they were just as aged and not involved in technology. So
right. So basically what you've got is you've got two sides who each have a foot in basically in World War II. Okay, they're still viewing the world kind of as World War II, that you can win a war, but you're basically dealing with modern weapons, thermonuclear devices, 30,000 between the two countries, basically aimed at each other, that would just destroy the earth, 10 times over. And so that's important to understand, because we're headed for this disaster, where you've got all these nuclear weapons and these individuals who, again, on both sides are thinking of war as World War II, not nuclear Armageddon.
Right. So, back to Able Archer, we're out in the field and stuff, and I'm hearing all this information coming across the radio, and I'm personally freaking out a little bit, this is the end of the world. I had thoughts of I'm going to be trapped in Europe. I'll never get to see my family again, all this kind of stuff. And I was thinking to myself, damn, and I had a scheduled flight to fly back for Christmas in 1983, which is another story, because it was the coldest period I've ever lived in my life flying back here that year. I don't know if I acclimatized to Europe's climate or what, but anyway, I'm in this Jeep and I'm hearing all this information that's just blowing my mind. And when we finally bivouac for the night in a forest area, they set up the tents for HQ, and I'm told I'm sequestered there. They don't want me to associate with the other MPs or anybody else, any other soldiers, because I've overheard all this information. So I know people think that I'm crazy for saying that we were close, we were on the brink. We were definitely on the brink. I know they were. Doubt. They knew they were, and it only took a grace of God to stop this from happening.
Yeah. In fact, I had mentioned this a little earlier to you, that Reagan wrote in his own notes about the incident. He said, we had many contingency plans for responding to a nuclear attack, but everything would happen so fast. I wondered how much planning or reason could be applied in such a crisis. 6 minutes to decide how to respond to a blip on a radar scope and decide whether to unleash Armageddon. How could anyone apply reason in a time like that?
No way.
And so, Reagan basically, one of the good things out of Able Archer is, well, two things happen. We've got a caller, but before we take the call, two things happen. One is Andropov dies, and of course, then they get Gorbachev. And the second thing is that this is the telling incident that basically causes Reagan to kind of rethink that we're pushing them to the brink, and we've been at the brink now with Able Archer, that we need to step back because we could have just drawn ourselves into.
Now there's a story and I cannot find any confirmation. I think there's one source for it, and again, it's about the communications and the back channels. But I think the Soviet double agent was really the backstory, the back, the back door for communication. But there was a story that I read, and I can't remember which book it was now, but that they were going to use Margaret Thatcher as a signal that this is still all war games. I mean, it's going to be when she goes on air for a speech and she'll be wearing a white suit. This is war games. And
yes.
I cannot find any confirmation.
It's in Gordievsky's book.
Is it?
Yes, it is. It is. And so on top of everything else, she happens to wear white. And that terrifies the Soviets because now she's giving a speech, she's wearing white. That's supposedly the signal for World War III. Let's take the call. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Hey, first off, Tom, I'm very envious that you talked Mont into coming on your show, so I hope you will visit us on a Monday sometime in the near future.
Well,
so the first thing I'm thinking of as you guys talk about this, Mont, obviously we know, those of us that know our history know how close we were to nuclear annihilation many times over, as you mentioned, and that leads me to where we are today. As I've always said, sort of the worst thing that our government can do is start tying AI into these systems, and as if we learn nothing from movies like War Games and Terminator and things like that. I wonder, since that's the worst possible idea, we have to assume that that's what our government's currently working on. And I wonder, if they are learning from history as well, as to maybe we shouldn't just let AI run all of the systems without some fail-safes. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's, a very safe assumption, Chuck. I mean, AI is famous for its hallucinations. When it doesn't understand something, it just makes it up. So, if they don't quite comprehend that this is going to be the, elimination of all of us, including setting it AI, I mean, it could just hallucinate something.
And Chuck, by the way, if you want Mont on your show, I'm serving as his agent, so we'll have to talk about
You'll get 10% of his fee.
10%. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll
Maybe
give you
15.
I'll give you 20% of my increase that Jed just gave me. So,
fantastic. Well, and then the other question I have.
You want to read a terrifying book. Read The Army of None. Which basically talks about the rise of autonomous weapons and how AI basically will run things in the future militarily. And it says that the Aegis missile system, for example, that we carry on ships right now, has an AI setting, but the military refuses to use it because every time they've tested it, it basically just starts shooting everything out of the sky.
Well, and so even if you look at, I don't know if you watched just how the war between Ukraine and Russia the drones have totally changed the theater of war.
Yep.
And we've seen all sorts of footage from how they're being used and how they're being used in different, capacities. But also, I wonder if, one of the things I always talk about is sort of the boogeyman philosophy. Do we even have a justifiable boogeyman to continue to have this type of arsenal? Or, is it basically at this point sort of just a relic of the Cold War, and we should start looking at other solutions? And are we so focused on this that we're going to miss the other stuff, like being able to, fight a swarm of drones and things like that?
Well, Chuck, I'm sure that that they will find some sort of boogeyman to,
of course,
build this thing up. I mean, if you look at the last 40 years of history, you can see that there's been sort of the boogeyman made up so they can keep buying their weapon systems and stuff. Although we weren't $40 trillion in debt 40 years ago either.
No, you're right. And when you read through even the book I'm reading right now by Tulsi Gabbard, she mentions that everything that when she was in Iraq, she said everything right down to the toilets, to the porta potties, were basically stamped with the name Halliburton on it. And she said, who was behind Halliburton? Mm-hmm. Dick Cheney. And she said, they made trillions of dollars off of that war. Yeah. And she said, we lost, thousands of men and women and ruined the lives of tens of thousands of others who are permanently maimed from it, all basically for no good reason.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember
even
who
worse
made
than
the
that.
quote.
I mean, I was just going to say it's even worse than that. I've talked to guys that came back and said, in a lot of cases, we were fighting our own weapons. We were
Yes.
how did the enemy get our own weapons and use it against us? And nobody could ever answer that question. And of course, nobody was held
we did
accountable.
leave
But
a couple $100 billion.
Well, even
dollars
before that, I mean, we
equipment
gave
back.
weapons to Afghanistan to use against Russia, and then they ended up using a lot of those systems against us in the future. But it is
they were
8 o'clock.
freedom
You guys need
fighters.
to go. Well, of course. So, and again, but who else but government would give somebody, weapons to
Yeah.
use against you? So
You know-
you guys have to go take a break, and I got to go. But I'll leave you guys with the words of George Carlin. It's a big club, and we ain't in it.
Correct.
Good way to summarize. I think we have one more caller, and then we're going to take a break. And nope, we're going to take a break now, and then we're going to take the caller, and then we're going to end the segment. Okay, so we're taking a break right now. You're listening to the morning call on WJOB 1230 AM, 104.7 FM. We'll be right back. All right. It's the morning call with Mon Hanley. We've been talking about how close we really were to nuclear Armageddon in the early 1980s.
Hey, Tom, before we take
Yes,
the
sir.
call,
Yes.
I wanted to call in yesterday to ask Jed and Verley a question. I was wondering if you could help me out with it.
Sure. What's that?
Have you heard the Christmas carols sung by Indians yet?
No, I've not.
It seems to be everywhere on social media right now.
I've not heard this.
Okay. I was just calling in because, Verley's like, she's kind of the gatekeeper on everything racist. And I just wondered if it was racist to like the Christmas carols sung by Indian people.
I can't answer that one because I don't know about it.
Okay.
Maybe
we can at the next break. Listen.
845-1100. We've got a caller. We have a caller, so we'll take that caller, and then we're going to wrap this up. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yeah, hi guys. You're talking about the profitability of war. I remember someplace heard a while back that the top 3 commodities in the world for profiting is military armaments, drugs, both illegal and not illegal, and oil. Now, what order that is, I forget. I think military hardware was at the top of the list. War is a very profitable institution.
It sure is.
As long as companies like Halliburton and the rest of these companies can. Just yesterday on CNBC, they did a whole segment on the defense contractors and how good their sector was looking in the coming year.
Well, think about it for a minute. We announced things like we're selling F-35s to Saudi Arabia, right? We're selling, these advanced planes and all this equipment to these other countries, and we talk about this is great for U.S. trade. Well, what we're really doing is we're promulgating and expanding the chance that somebody's going to have a really serious war somewhere, and we're going to get drawn into it. I mean, we're selling weaponry all over the world. I mean, we're the biggest arms dealer.
True.
Right.
And it's just sad. It's sad because we kind of pat ourselves on the back and say, "Oh, way to go!" We're selling arms. I mean, it's like, should we be selling those arms to everybody else? We're just upping the game.
I mean, I understand that, I've never thought profit was a dirty word. I do believe starting wars just to profit from war is evil. But the research and development that's gone into the new systems, I mean, even the internet would not be here if it hadn't been for military research.
Yeah, although Al Gore disagrees.
Well, I know.
I think it was Smedley Butler, Lieutenant General of the Marines or so, back in the 1930s, wrote a book called War is a Racket. He was a multiple winner of the Congressional Medal of Honor. He fought campaigns down in Latin America and everything else for the big, American corporations and that kind of thing. And he wrote the book on it 80 years ago, 90 years ago. And here we are all this time later, and how many deaths, how many mayhem, how much blood has been spilled around the world, and at the center of it is these corporations just making buku bucks. Look at Vietnam with Hughes helicopter and Brown and Root down in Texas. All the money they made in Vietnam. I'm convinced that that's the only reason we have all these little wars. It's a profit engine. That's all it is.
There is a series of books, and it started out with a book called Terminal List. Are you familiar? I can't remember the name of the author right now, but he's got 6, 7 books now. And Terminal List was turned into a mini-series on, I want to say, Prime, Amazon Prime. Great series, great books. He's a former Special Forces agent, and one of his quotes that I remember all the time now is, Don't raise your sons to go fight in some rich guy's war, essentially. And he saw it from the Special Forces side.
Yeah, I mean it's really sad that we, as you're both saying, we've created a lot of wars basically that just kind of are designed to prop up the military industry.
Well, and I've called in here many times when people are talking about veterans affairs and stuff like that, and I'll say thank you for your service, and I always say look, the greatest danger I was ever in was falling off a bar stool in a German bar. That's not necessarily true, but I also have to say, joining the military allowed me to get an education, a degree. So you take the good with the bad, I guess.
No, absolutely. And look, again, serving in the military, I think, is honorable, and we should pay respect to those of you that have served. I see nothing wrong with it. My problem is that when we almost celebrate the fact that we're going to sell 35 new fighter jets to Saudi Arabia, and we're selling this stuff off to countries that basically they want to be they want to show that in their region they're their own superpower, and they've got the best and greatest weapons. And when you give people that kind of stuff, I mean, it's just like anything else. I talked to a friend of mine who's a police officer, and we were talking about an individual who wants to be a police officer, somebody's son. And he said to me, Tom, he said, there's a guy that you never, ever want to give a badge and a gun to. All right? And he said, and
just the temperament?
Just the temperament and the attitude, and he's too gung-ho, and, he's going to go and he's going to shoot bad guys, and he's like, you don't want people to talk about, we're going to go shoot bad guys. And at the same time, we sell arms all the time to these little countries that basically you're kind of giving them a badge and a gun and saying, go to it. And you don't know what they can.
Well, I find it funny, and this is going back to the shooting last week. Was it last week in Washington where the National Guards?
A couple weeks ago, yeah.
Did you realize that they didn't have any bullets? They didn't have. One wasn't even carrying any equipment.
Yeah, the one that was carrying a gun didn't have any bullets in the gun. I didn't.
I don't understand why we give them guns, and I don't understand. But yet, on the other side, the perpetrators, like, they can use a knife to stab someone in the neck. They can use a jar of gasoline and douse somebody on
a train.
I just don't get it. Why do we have these things to protect us and we don't use them?
Yeah, it's very, very odd. It's very odd. But hey, thanks so much for the call.
All right, guys. Yeah.
I mean, again, it's scary because the more I read, and again, I have to tell you that the book that, I mean, I've read a lot of books in the last year, but the book that has bothered me the most is the one that I brought up 2 weeks ago by Annie Jacobson, because she explains how, you have this idea, okay, there's this nuclear exchange, there's this nuclear missile that's shot by North Korea. And when we go to respond, the Russians know North Korea shot the missile. But then when we respond, our missiles have to fly through Russian airspace, and the Russians can only assume that the missiles are coming at them, not North Korea. And she quotes Leon Panetta, the former Secretary of Defense, who says, there lies one of the biggest problems and one of the biggest fears that he has of nuclear Armageddon, is because all of our missiles, he said, it doesn't matter who we choose to take on in this world, they have to fly through Russian airspace to get there. And he said, and if you're a Russian general, are you just going to take the word of the United States that, hey, all those missiles flying overhead, they're not aimed at you, they're aimed at somebody else? He said, because, would the United States allow Russian missiles to fly through the United States if they were, and he raises a question, if they were at war with, say, someone in Central America? We wouldn't allow it. And his point is they don't go sideways, they don't go east to west, they go over the poles. And again, it's just terrifying to think of this. And you've got these again, as Chuck Pullen brought up, these automated systems now, and the Russians are putting automated systems in place as well as the United States. And that book, The Army of None, pushes that premise that.
Well, I'm sure it's a lot cheaper than training soldiers.
Absolutely, and that's what the book says. It's so much cheaper, but the author says, he says, look, technology doesn't always work, and he points out, he says, your washing machine, your microwave oven, they all fail at some point. He said, do you want a system to fail that basically is that can trigger nuclear Armageddon?
Well, those drones with the thermal imaging cameras are just terrifying. When you see them hunting live soldiers,
yes,
it's terrifying.
Yeah, and again, you're talking about technology that's not that hard to create.
No.
And we spent over an hour on this, but we never even talked about the fact that the United States and the Soviet Union had nuclear weapons as small as a suitcase. They had the suitcase bombs, and after the dismantling of the Soviet Union, to this day, we still don't know where the 300 Soviet nuclear suitcase bombs went. They don't know where they are.
And yet our borders are open for 30-some million people that we don't know anything about.
Yeah, and these bombs have about the same capacity, because they're thermonuclear. They have about the same power as the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And so there could be somebody out there. I mean, we know this much. We know that the Soviets, the archives and former Soviet generals said, well, we built 300 suitcase bombs, but we don't know where they're at. And they're somewhere. And someday someone could be standing in downtown Chicago, downtown in the middle of Manhattan.
I kind of hope they're in the same warehouse as Indiana Jones' Ark of the Covenant.
You hope. You absolutely hope.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
This is great. This is great. And again, a lot of people had texted me and called me and said, hey, have Mont on this conversation you guys have been having about nuclear war. People need to hear this because people don't realize how close we came.
I hope that's the case.
Well, no, it's
pretty dry.
It is dry, but at the same time, it's something that people need to realize how close we've come. And hopefully we learn from it. So thank you so much.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah. Yes. With that, Merry Christmas. Well, next week, of course, you're welcome to come in. We're going to have MX and
Amex and Mad Max.
No, it'll be MX and the Christmas hysteria or Christmas fiasco, one of the two.
Okay.
So, tell you what, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Morning Call with Tom Dabertin. Mont, thank you so much for being here. We'll be
welcome.
right back. All right, we're back, and again, that was a lot of fun for me because on a very serious subject to talk to somebody like Mont who literally witnessed this firsthand. It's amazing what went on in the 1980s, and we don't realize it. And let me ask you, Lynette, you're young. Do you fear or worry about nuclear war at all?
I do. That's one of my biggest fears.
Yeah. So some of this conversation had to be a little scary, isn't it? I mean, we have between the U.S. and the Soviet Union or the Russians, we have about close almost 12,000 nuclear weapons aimed at each other, and we don't even have to use. We have to use just a portion of those basically to destroy the Earth. I mean, it's just shocking and it's terrifying. And we came so close, though, in the 1980s, and people don't realize it. And one of the things that Mont didn't get a chance to talk about this morning was he said that some of the best music and some of the best concerts he ever got to attend were in Europe in the early 1980s, and they were largely being funded by by the CIA. And they were being used basically to, again, we were trying to goat the Soviets, so we were paying for these concerts, which is nuts. So we'll take your calls, 845-1100, but also want to change gears a little bit. Speaking of nuclear Armageddon, it seems to me that the football playoffs have basically reached the brink. People are not happy. There are just too many upset individuals on all sides on how this whole selection process came down, and I wonder if anybody else agrees on that, because it's just a disaster. You have just an example. You have a ranked team pretty much the entire season who then gets dropped at the last minute because college football wants to appease these basically these leagues that nobody really follows. So it's bizarre there. And then let's see, somebody texted me about this, and I want to bring this up. There's a social media ban that's going in place next week in Australia. So if you're under age 16, you're going to be banned from social media. Lynette, I mean, you're young. Obviously, you're in your mid-20s now, but what do you think about that? Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
I'm kind of mixed on it. I think because I've heard the side of those kids on TikTok. They share what they think. And I can agree that there's not a lot of spaces for teenagers to really hang out or talk to each other besides the internet. The internet's it is a good place to express yourself, even though there's a lot of downsides with it.
Well, so Sunday there was a piece on 60 Minutes that basically a site called, I think, Character AI,
Yes.
and basically that it's led to several teenagers committing suicide. That they think they're having conversation with someone real, and they're not, even though they know that it's AI driven, but before you know it, pulls them in that they start believing that the person on the other end is real.
Yes, that is a thing that they do. That I've heard of character AI. You talk to any made up character you want to, and it talks back.
And basically in one case the character AI is basically feeding into the girl's depression. She's depressed, she's upset, she's concerned, she doesn't fit in, and the character is starting to tell her that maybe she should take her life, which is, I mean, I stuttered on that one because I just can't believe that it happened. It was painful to watch and painful to hear, but the owners of Character AI, which is now owned by Google, it was two Google software engineers, left the company, started it, and then went back to the company when Google bought them out. Basically haven't shown a lot of remorse for what they did. They've created the system that, again, relies on AI, so it's kind of hands-off. Nobody's monitoring what's being said, and it led to the unfortunate suicide of a young woman. Very terrifying to me. So I don't know. I think that social media puts a lot of pressures on a lot of young people that they don't need to have. I mean, there's enough peer pressure. Look, when you're 14, 15 years old, you get up in the morning, you go to school, and you've got enough pressure as it is, right? I mean, you've got your friends, your enemies, and the people, the unknowns at school, and and there's all those social pressures, and now you've complicated things because it's like you can't escape that pressure. It's 24 hours a day. It's there. You wake up in the middle of the night, you check your phone, there's another message. You can't escape it, right? I mean, that's very scary. I don't know. I don't know whether a total ban is appropriate, but there needs to be some sort of limit. So 845-1100 if you've got an opinion on that, because again, this is going on in Australia, and people are saying that maybe it's time to have it here. I'll say this much: when Walt called in this morning, he was the first caller, and he mentioned about sleeping, and some new rhythms and new suggestions on how to sleep. One of the things that I'm finding that I've got to do is not look at my cell phone when I plug it in on the nightstand at night. It's too convenient for me to check Facebook and check social media, and I've got to say it's just a kind of a force of habit, but I'm trying to change that. My wife, the good news is that my wife always goes to sleep before I do because she has to get up earlier than I do for work, except on Wednesdays, and so as soon as I start looking at Facebook on social media, she'll roll over and she'll say, "Turn your phone off. Just don't do that." The light is bothering her. So that's kind of a good fail safe for me. But I know that when I post or when I reply to things on social media, especially Facebook at night, I get like instant replies from all my old classmates. They're all on social media at 10 o'clock at night. So it's taking up a lot more time, I think, in our lives than we need to. So I don't know. Maybe there need to be some curbs. I don't know. It bothers me too, the false information. I've brought this up before. So a friend of mine from East Chicago, where you live, just posted yesterday. She posted about what a great thing that Barack Obama did, because on December 6th she posts a story how he opened up these free clinics on the south side of Chicago, these free health clinics that he funded himself. He put $150 million of his own money in. And before I could respond and say it was fake news, somebody else responded and said, this is fake news, right? And she's like, no, I didn't. And then I sent the link where Snopes, for example, had discounted the entire story. But there's so much false information out there. If you like Barack Obama, that's fine, but like him for what he's really done, not for a bunch of false stories that are out there, and that's what's scary. Social media is just a bastion of false information. Mont and I talked this morning about all the false information the U.S. and the Soviets were planning against each other in the early 1980s. Could you imagine? We probably would have been blown up in a nuclear exchange if social media had existed in the 1980s. I mean, that's how terrifying it is. False information, we laugh it off, and some people, will play into it and believe it, and other people just like to play it as what it is, false. But sooner or later, those stories have wings. Those stories have feet, and people start to buy into those falsehoods, and they buy into that false information, and it's kind of terrifying to me. So 845-1100 is the number to call if you'd like to join in. The other story that's out there, of course, is this whole issue of healthcare, and I've talked about this before. And when you look at the Affordable Care Act and the original intent of the act, there were a series of things that were supposed to be included in the Affordable Care Act, and they're not. People call it Obamacare. The idea that you could buy insurance across state lines, the idea that industry and business could work through associations to buy insurance, another thing that's never happened. The idea that basically that Medicare would create basically a catastrophic policy for individuals who had, really significant health care problems, and it would reduce the burden on regular health insurance companies and lower rates. None of those things happen. And because of it, we continue to have runaway inflation as it relates to health care costs, and healthcare insurance. The Kaiser Family Foundation, I think last week, said that the cost for health insurance this year was going to average 9%, a 9% increase. And they were they were basically claiming that was a success story. There was only a 9% increase because it went up by 15% the year before. So that the cost is slowing. And I'm thinking to myself, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when we had 9% inflation in this country, people were, rightly so, they were mad as hell at the Biden administration, who ignored 9% inflation. But then when we have 9% inflation on health insurance, that's good news. It's like, wow, what a disaster. And it's not going to change. And Lynette, I'm going to put you on the spot again. I mean, it's your generation right now that has to worry most about health insurance, because you're coming on board and it's unaffordable for you. I mean, right?
Actually, that reminded me, I have to find a second job soon. Hopefully, one that has benefits like health insurance.
Yeah, because right now you're still covered on your dad's policy, right?
Yes.
But it won't be long.
Won't be long.
And
Very soon.
again, you have to worry about having some sort of coverage, and so it's a huge problem, and it's a problem. My son points out, he's just a couple years older than you, and he says, look, he said, I'm going to tell you right now, the party that addresses health insurance is going to win over your generation, because you're all looking at health insurance that's unaffordable. I mean, if you do go get a job somewhere else, chances are you're going to have to pay a good portion of your paycheck for that health insurance. So that reduces the value of the job, the income from the job tremendously. And the health insurance that's out there, it's a shell game. You have to try and guess to see if they're going to cover the treatment or not. It's problematic right and left, and so it's really, I can see how important it would be to your generation. I mean, my generation, we're all getting ready to hop on Medicare, or we're hopping on Medicare as we speak, and so we're kind of at the back end of things. But your generation has some real headaches. Mine didn't have. I mean, when I went to work, they were peddling things like HMOs, okay, as a solution to the rising cost of health insurance, and that didn't work. But other than that, I mean, you could still pick up insurance relatively cheap. Your employer pretty much paid for most of it. You might have to contribute a few dollars. This is back in the early 1980s, but not like now, where they say to you, well, you have to contribute 30% of the cost, but 30% of the cost is $1,000. It's $1,000 a month, so you're going to pay $300. Well, $300 basically now that's robbing you of some pretty significant
That's
income.
an entire check from here.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So okay, so you can have health insurance, Lynette, but you're going to have to pay for it. And again, we'll pay 70%. You're going to pay 30%, but that's $300. So basically, what are you going to live on? Luckily you have the cleanest car on earth, so you don't have to pay for car washes. It's just, again, it's a problem that I don't think a lot of politicians understand that we've got to come to grips with. And if we don't, your generation isn't going to be supportive of anybody that's currently in office. So I think the Republicans are downplaying the importance of it. They don't understand it. And the Democrats, for what it's worth so far, it's just like a dog whistle. I mean, they're making a lot of noise, but they're not offering any real solutions. I mean, the idea that, well, we're just going to extend the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act insurance, we're going to extend it for 3 more years, doesn't get us anywhere. It just gets us into debt. And once again, that's the other thing that your generation has to fear, which is the massive amount of federal debt that we have. So, okay, which do you want? You want the massive debt, or you want health insurance, or you want, basically, the answer is we're not going to give you either of them. So I can see the disconnect. 845-1100 is the number to call. It's we've got about 25 minutes left for the show this morning, and a couple of interesting interesting issues that are floating around out there on the Affordable Care Act and health insurance, and then on a lighter side, you have the college football playoffs, which really I think are just a disaster right now. And yes, I'm a Notre Dame fan, and I don't agree with them that the idea that they're going to act like a spoiled child, but maybe it's necessary to drive home the message that college football needs to really reconsider how they choose teams for the playoffs. I mean, Lynette, I know you're not a big sports fan, but you heard about all the problems over the weekend, and it just seems to me like the other thing that's going on with college football, and John Doherty and I talked a little bit about this before, is that with NILs and the portals and everything else, college football is kind of become almost minor league football. It's just short of being professional football these days, and that's complicating things because universities and colleges make a tremendous amount of money off of their football programs, and money still steers the ship for a lot of things, including universities. And do you want your university to be so tied into college sports that it basically occludes or blocks the real mission of the university? So that's another issue. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll finish out the last 20 minutes of the morning call on WJOB. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Last 20 minutes. Just going to take a quick look at traffic. Again, the biggest slowdown right now going into Chicago appears to be off of the Ryan, and I can tell you that it's backed up all the way down into the Bishop Ford now. So looking at solid traffic all the way down to 103rd and Stony Island. Northwest Indiana, we're in really good shape. Skyway or the toll road, 8094 and I-65, all in good shape. Again, other than the Ryan, 294 looks pretty good. The problem that existed earlier on I-57 has been abated, and the usual problems on the Kennedy, the Eisenhower, and the Stevenson. So, again, sorry folks if you're stuck on the Ryan going in. It's been troublesome for weeks, and I'm not sure why, because they've actually been had to drive it a few times into the city, and there's never an explanation of why things are so slow. I guess maybe people just see the skyline and say, "Oh my gosh, well, look, there's the skyline," and they slow down and take photos. I don't know what it is. You don't see any accidents. You don't see any explanation for what's going on, but it is problematic. And then the weather.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're at 36 degrees with highs of 37 and lows of 17. We'll be having some rain and then changing to snow up to 1 inch. And then it's going to be cloudy and windy. Later tonight will be a couple of evening flurries, otherwise mostly cloudy and colder. And then, tomorrow on Thursday, we'll be having highs of 26 and lows of 22. Mostly cloudy and very cold. And then Friday we'll be having highs of 31 and lows of 5. Mostly cloudy with a couple of flurries.
So let me ask you this: what is your take on the weather? I've never really asked you. Do you like cold weather? Do you like winter weather or not?
I like colder. I like fall weather.
Okay, fall weather is nice.
Kind of cold. I hate the heat, but I hate the snow.
Yeah, fall weather is nice. The problem is that it doesn't last very long. I mean, I think there's part of fall weather that's a lot nicer than spring. Spring is totally unpredictable, right? I mean, you get a cold wind and it changes everything, and you think it's going to be like 65 degrees and then it drops to 45 degrees. The fall's a little bit more steady, a little bit more reliable, but it lasts such a short period of time around here. Again, as everybody knows, I'll be headed down to Florida come January and spend some time down there. And I just checked my phone, and it's going to be 83 degrees today down in Florida, where my condo is. But and it's nice. But I also do like. I have to say, I grew up here. I love winter weather. I love the view of the snow coming down. In fact, it was funny. Sunday morning, Donna wakes me up. It's like 7 in the morning. Okay, I usually get up pretty early, but not on the weekends. On the weekends, I like to just lay around in bed and turn the TV on and see what's going on, and fall back to sleep and play with the dogs. They'll jump up on the bed, and I'll visit with them. So she wakes me up about 7 a.m. because she gets up, even on weekends, she's up by 6:30. She gets up and she sees that it's snowing. And she wakes me up and she says, "Oh, you have to come. We have to go sit in the living room, just look out the windows and enjoy the beautiful fluffy flakes," right? So, I mean, we're doing it. And it's funny because both of us, can't wait to get down to Florida to the warm weather, but we're enjoying those snowflakes. It was beautiful. It was beautiful Sunday morning while it was snowing. It snowed for about an hour or two, and then it ended. We've got a caller, so let's take that caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning again.
Hey, Mike.
I wasn't going to call in, but I got to talk about the college thing again.
Sure.
Okay. When I help people with their race cars, tune them, and do things with racing, drag racing, NHRA drag racing. Mm-hmm. And when they race, 2 people go to the line. One wins, one loses, and they keep adding up their points. And then when they get to the U.S. Nationals, they get locked in, and then those 10 get reset, and those 10 are in for the championship. The other ones can still race and then can put those other people out, but they play fair square. That, I heard on the sports, I listen to some of the stupid sports announcers saying everything. Okay, like, this one team, well, they got in because they had more rushing yards. They didn't have as many interceptions. It doesn't matter. If you win, you win. Not this, this one did better because it didn't have much rushing yards or didn't have no interceptions or the quarterback didn't get sacked 100 times.
Well,
it should. It should be fair and square.
Well, look, the situation that happened over the weekend, you have Alabama, which, of course, Alabama is a big draw, right? But you have Alabama, who's lost 3 times, and then you compare them to Notre Dame, who lost twice, and Notre Dame lost by a total of 4 points at the very beginning of the season. Granted, I don't know who came up with that schedule to put 2 of the toughest teams that Notre Dame would play all year at the beginning of the season. I think that was a dumb move, especially with a freshman quarterback who now has proven himself to be really great. But nonetheless, they had Notre Dame ranked the last 4 or 5 weeks, and then they disappear from the rankings, and they start throwing in teams like James Madison University, Tulane. I watched the game. Tulane played, I'm trying to think of who they played, in fact, the other night. And, they were playing in front of what was described as a record crowd of 38,000 people. I mean, they played like they were kind of a mid-tier team. And for them to be in the playoffs and to leave Notre Dame out, I think was a big mistake. I just did.
Yeah. It's just like, now the playoffs are going to be coming on for the big top 10. And, like IU is going to play Oklahoma. How do they, they got the top 10. How do they choose which teams in the top 10 play?
Yeah, again, it's all conjecture. I mean, to be very honest with you, you can go and attack the system itself and say, well, okay, who really makes the determination of who's top 10? I get it, but it seems to me that the system's not totally fair. It's not structured the way it should be, and I think it's really cast a shadow on an otherwise very, very entertaining football season. And look, right now, I hope I'm IU all the way. I mean, I really do want, for a lot of reasons. I use kind of the perennial underdog, and so you like the underdog a lot of times. I'd like to see them win. I'd like for them to capture something that they've not had, and nobody had them on their radar. I think they'd be great if they could win the national championship. Yeah. I don't know ultimately if they can beat for example, Ohio State. They beat them the other day, but 2 times is a lot tougher than just once. So it's hard to say. It really is hard to say.
And then it's like I've watched replays and talks about Notre Dame and Purdue. We can't forget Purdue. That they're there. And you watch it. It's all these teams make these little mistakes, and it's just like now AFC, NFC. Okay. For one time they were so bragging that the Bears was number 1, and as soon as they lost Green Bay, bam, they dropped to number 7. Okay, but they lost that one game. Now they got some more games to play. They're still in the playoffs. But thing is they dropped down. But you know what? They're going to come back up. Honestly, it's the way the ball bounces and the way who gets the football.
Well, look, sports in general should be there for entertainment, and I think sometimes we put too much focus on sports in our lives. I enjoy watching football and basketball as much as anybody, but maybe at times we put too much emphasis on it in our lives. I mean, if IU wins the national championship, does that change anything for me personally? No. It gives me the satisfaction of knowing that they won and that I supported them. If Notre Dame had been in the playoffs, would that really have changed anything for me? No. It's just that I'm entertained and I enjoy watching their games more than I would enjoy watching, say, Alabama or Oklahoma or James Madison or Tulane. So I get it, but I don't know. We've gotten to the point too in this country where the amount of money that's spent on sports has gotten out of hand. I mean, college sports, you're talking about billions of dollars. You look at the NFL and look how much money they're paying these guys. And
Yeah.
I mean, is it really worth it? Should we be paying athletes, 20 times the value that most CEOs make? I mean, to me, it's crazy. I don't think that. I don't think it's worth it, but then the whole entertainment industry is that way. I mean,
I kind of watch all the college teams, and what I mostly enjoy is I like to see how each college plays and tries to do the best they can. I don't judge them that they're this, that, because every college football team, basketball team, and all sorts of their sports.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy watching it because I like to see. They try to do the best that they can do as a team, and their leader teaches them to be the best they could. If you lose, fine, you did the best that you could do for that team, as a team,
Yeah, no, I look again. Hey, we both enjoy it. I know you were texting Saturday night your chicken wings to me when you were watching the IU Ohio State game, and look, it was fun, right? It was fun. It was fun that you were going to watch the game. It was fun. I watched the game. I think Verley responded to your text. She was obviously watching the game. I think Jed was, but he just wasn't responding. So the people in that group were all responding, and enjoying the game. But
yeah, and it was a long time. I went Saturday before in the afternoon to get my wings. I got 25 of them. I say 12 for the college game, and then the next day I put them in the refrigerator, say 12 for the Bears game. The college game, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It was hard for me to try to grab a wing and eat it because I'm so into the game. The Bears game, I think after 5 minutes I had all my wings gone on the Bears game.
Yeah, the Bears game was not as exciting as the IU game. The IU game was exciting because once again the underdog rose to the occasion and vanquished the odds-on favorite Ohio State, and it was a remarkable game. And I will say this: I don't think any team that I've seen in college football could beat the way IU is playing in that second half. I mean, let's face it, that second half was amazing.
And the nice thing is, all of the people on the football team for IU played the best they could, and they won, and they did a good job to show that their fans and their students from that college that we can still win.
Yeah, I mean, it was an exciting game. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The fact that they pulled it off, the fact that they won, and the way they played. I mean, that third quarter and fourth quarter. I mean, IU did have some penalties. They made some mistakes out there, which concern me. I mean, if they have another game, will they make those same mistakes, which could cost them, considerably, or will they, basically shy away from making those mistakes again? And sometimes that happens too, and then you don't play to your fullest capability. So there's a lot to still figure out. But it was a great game.
I'm going to let you finish up your show. Your host you had in there was wonderful on his explanation of all the difficulties and problems we had in the 80s.
Scary.
Your show has been wonderful. All the callers, all their opinions were wonderful this morning. I enjoyed listening to each and every one's opinions, and your producers have been doing such a wonderful job this morning. Can't forget her.
Thank you.
She appreciates it.
She's quiet back there. It scares me sometimes when somebody's quiet. Something's going on.
What? I think she may be quiet, but she's fully engaged. I'll say that.
So all you guys at the station and everybody and all the listeners, just have a wonderful day, and I'll let you wrap it up, and everybody just have a wonderful day.
Hey, thanks so much. So, Lynette, I know you're not a sports fan, but did you watch the game Saturday night or not?
No.
You didn't? Really?
No.
So, wait a minute. So, is there a threshold? Is there a point that you'll watch sports? Because you really don't watch sports, do you?
Nope.
No sports at all.
Mm-mm.
So you have no interest in baseball, no interest in basketball, no interest in football. I mean, those are the big ones. Hockey.
I used to play softball when I was a kid,
So you played softball. So
only
I
for a
mean,
month.
okay, so just not interested.
I mean, I think volleyball is kind of fun.
Okay, all right. So I mean, again, Mike was right. It was a unique game. It really was. I mean, it was here's this underdog, that rises to the occasion and just, I mean, totally handles Ohio State that looks like they're invincible and really did a pretty good number on them. And there's a 60 Minutes, by the way, there's a 60 Minute story coming out this Sunday about IU and their football team, which looks to be very, very interesting. So we'll have to tune in for that one Sunday evening, because they're doing an expose about how IU went from being the worst football team in college football to the number one ranked school. So that'll be an interesting story. But so you just basically, I mean, I would assume, your dad or family members watch sports.
Yes, they do.
And so you just kind of walk away from it and what,
Yes.
like steal the chips and dip and take a run, or what?
Yep.
I mean, and that's okay. That's okay, because, as I was saying before, maybe sports is another one of those things, kind of like social media, that's become too dominant in our lives. I mean, I do sit there and I do regret sometimes that I'll sit there and watch 6 or 8 hours of sports on Saturday or Sunday, and then think about all the things I could have done that day. So maybe it's just too much. But at the same time, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So my future son-in-law and I sat down in the basement and we watched probably 4 or 5 football games that day. There wasn't anything else we were going to do. I mean, after all, it was snowing, it was cold, it was nasty out. I mean, I had no interest in going out other than to run the snow thrower. I wasn't going outside. So, I mean, in those kinds of cases, it's kind of entertaining. But like when I'm down in Florida, I have to admit I don't watch a lot of sports. I mean, if there's a specific game that I want to watch, I'll tune it in. But it's not the same as sitting here. I mean, when you're down in my basement, it's nice and warm. You got the little blanket on, you're reclined, and you're watching the television, you're watching a game, like you kind of forget about how crappy it is outside, and it's kind of nice. At the same time, when you're down in Florida and it's 80 degrees and sunny, and you look out and you see the beach, it's like, what am I doing watching this? So, I mean, here comes Matt Kaufman. Hey, Matt, did you just a question? Did you watch the game Saturday night? Okay, there's another one. You didn't watch the IU Ohio State game. No, I didn't get to. Well, there you go. Okay, so two people that didn't let that game kind of overshadow their lives. For a lot of us, it was a big deal, but for a lot of others, I mean, it wasn't the biggest deal in our lives. So there you go. Well. I should mention next week, among other things, we'll do the annual Christmas show because, believe it or not, for the 2 weeks after next week, we're going to be off the air because we'll be, Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve is the 24th, and New Year's Eve is December 31st. They both fall on Wednesdays, so we won't be doing our show. And then we'll be back, of course, for January 7th, we'll be back here live on the air. So I've got a little respite, unless I do some Friday shows, which is entirely possible. I haven't talked to Jed yet today to see if he needs me to fill in this Friday or not. So otherwise, I will see you all next Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. And next Wednesday again is the annual Christmas show. MX has been hard at work, coming up with all kinds of gifts and awards for lots of people, and we'll see how many friends he makes and how many enemies. But nonetheless, we've done this the last few years, so we'll have the MX Christmas show right here on WJOB starting at 6 a.m. Next Wednesday morning. Keep it tuned here all day, all week to WJOB, 1230 AM, 104.7 FM in Hammond, Indiana. Have a great day, folks. Be careful out there. Traffic is slow, and the weather's not great. Bye-bye.